Someone make it make sense.
I'll be a couple.
Hello, guys. So we are here to cover the Daubert hearing from December 12th in Karen Reed. Many of you guys have maybe already seen some of this hearing or part of it, but we're going to go over some of the things I think are especially relevant, and especially assessing the new attorneys in this case. Shout out to Iowa's Backyard Cam. I'm glad you're here as always. Hope Squeaky's doing well also, and Batcat. And I want to say Puff Muffin, Puff, I think it's the other cat, new cat. So we've talked a lot about Daubert, but here I've got the actual pulled up here, the actual Daubert standard, because that's what this hearing is for. Shout out to Candace as well. Love you guys. So that's what this whole thing is for. So first off, let's talk just a little bit as a refresher course about Dr. Russell. So Dr. Russell, that's part of the reason this is happening, happened on December 12th, right? Because Dr. Russell came in mid-trial last time. And so what happened was, somebody had reached out to her via the district attorney's office in Los Angeles, which is where Jackson is practicing, and said, hey, we've got somebody who might be perfect. So this is kind of a last minute thing. So when they brought her in, they did have like kind of a mini Daubert hearing, but at the same day, they also needed to hear from the ARCA dudes. And so they didn't really get to fully go through her credentials. So as such, they were basically getting her approved kind of last minute, like I said, in order to testify in the first trial. And because they didn't really have a chance to fully go through this entire thing, what ended up happening was her testimony was quite limited. She really kind of testified more to like her emergency experience, but the real reason that they wanted her to be there was because of the dog bite. And that was just something they didn't really have time to get into, because she's like an expert in like pretty much everything, but including dog bites. And is it, a dog bite versus a car accident, stuff like that. And so while she was more than qualified as an individual, they didn't really have a chance to get into the actual science behind how you can tell, because it really kind of gets into like forensic odontology, which, used to be used as with humans and has gone the way of the dinosaur. And this is kind of a niche specialty, right? As it pertains to dogs. So this Daubert hearing that was held on the 12th was really to kind of go through all of this. And in fact, they spent the entire day and didn't even finish. They're going to be finishing this on January 7th. Oh, by the way, for anyone who hasn't heard it, this trial has been continued. Judge Bev finally granted that continuance that both parties had moved for. So this trial will now be starting on April 1st. So that does give them a little bit more time. So therefore, they're going to be finishing this hearing on January 7th. Now, there's a lot of moving parts here, right? Because you've got Mr. Alessi, who's coming in from New York, and then you've got Dr. Russell and Mr. Jackson, who live in California, Los Angeles. So they had to coordinate all these different schedules to come up with that date. So we're going to take a look here at the Daubert Standard, okay? So this provides a framework for a trial court judge to assess the reliability and relevance of expert witness testimony before it is presented to a jury. Established in 1993. So here's the Daubert Standard. So this is what's going to be assessed as it pertains to Dr. Russell. Okay, so one, here's how we determine. Remember, it's not just the expert, is their methodology valid? So this matters because we're going to hear the word methodology come up a lot in this, okay? So one, whether the technique or theory in question can be and has been tested. Now, this matters because we've probably heard this, you guys have probably heard this before. When it comes to these experts, one of the questions they will ask a lot is, can this be replicated? Can we also test this ourselves? Is this a methodology that is testable, right? A good example is, let me think. A good example actually relates to Koberger. And for anyone who doesn't realize or hasn't seen, we're going to be doing tonight, we're going to be delving deep into the IgG because there's a lot of questions and confusion about that. And it's not anybody's fault. It's kind of been confusing. So, but one thing that matters there is, as we will talk more about tonight, according to the prosecution, the FBI did not save any of their information, any of their database, anything. They didn't save anything to show their work. And so, rightfully so, I would imagine the defense is going to say, well, then how can we test it? So kind of similar overlap there, right? But you have to be able to test it, right? And duplicate the results. But this also does pertain to this case because we've heard similar talk as it pertains to oh my God, like the telemetry, right? And how they had to with her Lexus, you know, they had to do a chip on and a chip off and a chip on and whatnot. And is this retestable? Okay, so step 2. So whether it has been subjected to publication and peer review, that's also going to come up today in this Daubert hearing. Its known or potential error rate. Number 4, the existence and maintenance of standards controlling its operation. And number 5, whether it has attracted widespread acceptance within a relevant scientific community. Now, that's going to be maybe a little bit more of a challenge here because, again, this is really more niche. So that's going to be part of what this is coming down to, right? This is a really niche area of expertise as it pertains to the dog bites. So while it's niche, right, that doesn't necessarily mean it can't be considered valid. But this is where the challenge is going to be because there may or may not be such a widespread acceptance as there are with other areas of expertise as it pertains to expert witnesses in trial. Just additionally, the Daubert standards supplanted the Frye standard, which focused preliminary on the general acceptance of scientific evidence within a particular field. So some state courts still use the Frye standard, but the Daubert really is the more, and you'll sometimes even hear people say Frye Daubert. They'll use them kind of like interchangeably, like one, both, you know, one or the other or both. So that's the first thing. So I would imagine probably most of you guys who are watching have already seen Dr. Russell testify at the first trial. Again, she is overqualified and like for everything. She has an incredibly interesting life story. Let me pull up here. Okay, so she has an incredibly diverse background and interesting life story. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to watch all of her direct because it is very, 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 very long. And a lot of this is kind of redundant. But what I do want to watch is a little bit of this new attorney, because that's what's interesting here to me, is we've got a new defense attorney, Mr. Alessi. This is the first time he's appearing before this court, came in from New York. I don't really know why they brought in another defense attorney, to be honest. Or not that he's not qualified or a great attorney. Most of his background has been dealing with financial type of cases, like white collar. So I'm not quite sure what the strategy is there. Maybe at some point they will tell us. But they have decided to let him question this witness. Now, in the first trial, it was Mr. Jackson who questioned Dr. Russell, both in the little mini Daubert hearing and also in the trial. So they've got a new attorney with Dr. Russell, and he's very methodical. He's very thorough. But it is, you know, he's rightfully so, right? He's checking all the boxes. He's laying all the foundation. But and at first it seems like, okay, yes, but then it does start to feel a little bit arduous. But we'll watch a little bit of this so we can kind of get a feel for him. But I think some of the most interesting things that came out through this Daubert hearing was actually hearing for our first time, right? Seeing Hank Brennan on cross, because as we know, he is a defense attorney. He's serving as a special prosecutor in this case. And we've seen him, at least in my opinion, I saw a change from his first appearance into his second appearance. But boy, oh boy, if you saw it in the thumbnail, the claws come out from him in this cross-examination. And that's when I kind of, it dawned on me, we have all defense attorneys, right? Because the only real prosecutors are sitting there, Lally, like a toad on a log, completely silent, just the furniture, basically blending in with the furniture. So everybody who's doing any type of speaking today, except for the judge, they're all defense attorneys. And it's like almost like too many defense attorneys in the room at the same time. But it's really interesting. So we will start out with hearing just a little bit of Mr. Alessi. I was asking if that, I think, is your phone. It doesn't look like that on my end. Is anybody else just seeing picture in picture? Because it does not look like that on my end.
Judge, this is 22-117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. Can I have counsel identify themselves for the record, starting with the Commonwealth?
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Good morning, Your Honor. Hank Brennan for the Commonwealth. Along with me is Attorney Adam Lally and Attorney Laura McLaughlin.
Good morning, Mr. Brennan. Good morning, Mr. Lally. Good morning, Ms. McLaughlin. Good morning, Your Honor. Alan Jackson on behalf of Ms. Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson.
Good morning, Your Honor. Elizabeth Little, also on behalf of Ms. Reed.
Good morning, Ms. Little.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Unetti for Karen Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Unetti.
Good morning, Your Honor. Robert Alessi for Ms. Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Alessi. Good morning, Ms. Reed. All right, so for today, we have our Daubert hearing. I asked through Mr. Clerk the parties to have a proposed scheduling order for me. Were you able to do that?
We've begun the discussions on it. I think we could have it shortly, Your Honor. I have some
Mr.
proposals
Brennan.
on the defense. I just want a few moments to reflect on it.
Okay. All right, so during a recess or something, I'd like you to
Excellent.
at least give me something so that we can discuss it today. There are some discovery motions and then just some housekeeping matters. So I would like to get started right away. Is Dr. Russell here?
Yes, she is, Your Honor.
Okay. Oh, good morning, doctor. Would you come on up to the witness stand, please?
And one of the things that I wanted to show this for is because, again, this is Mr. Alessi's first time appearing before this court. And, oh, look, there's Turtle Boy. And look, he's got a big grin on his face, rightfully so. He's excited for Dr. Russell. But it's going to be really interesting to hear just how he must have been, I don't know if warned is the right word, or maybe he watched some of the trial. But it's going to be really interesting, if you haven't seen this, to see just how he makes his very first appearance before the court and how formal it is, as in to show respect for Judge Bev. I thought it was really interesting. Yes, she is. I will just go ahead and say, for anyone who didn't hear this first time, so she was this doctor, okay, Dr. Russell, again, she lives in California now, but she grew up or was raised, she was from Massachusetts, okay? She was the very first female police officer. I believe it was the Boston Police Department. Maybe we'll hear just a little bit of that. She was the very first female police officer. It was either Canton or Boston, but badass. Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
The bailiff got the chair ready for her. Excellent.
I do. Good morning, Dr. Russell.
And one thing I thought about too is like for Karen Reed, right? You know, we all know that like now that she's having this retrial, it's costing them a ton more money, right? But I thought how interesting that even with that being the case, you know, they brought on another defense attorney, and every time that this defense attorney comes in from New York, they're having to pay for that. But also every time that Dr. Russell comes and testifies in person for these Daubert hearings, because we know that's what Judge Bev prefers, you know, not only is Alan Jackson having to fly back and forth, but also they're having to fly her back and forth, from California to New York or to Massachusetts, nonetheless. And that because they didn't get it done in one day, they're having to come back a second day. For me, I'm just thinking about how much more money this is costing them, but yet they're still not sparing any expense to provide her the best defense possible. So I think that's a good thing. I just thought it was important to know. In other words, they must see, obviously with Dr. Russell, it's that important. But again, bringing in another defense attorney, they must really have seen that was necessary to incur that additional expense for her paying for it. So.
Okay, the defense is calling Dr. Russell as a witness.
Okay, so here we go, Mr. Alessi.
Jim, can I have the exhibits? Will counsel need the exhibits for examination of this witness, or can I have them with me and look at them?
Okay.
Your Honor, whatever
So there's Mr. Alessi.
your preference is, we will.
You know what's really funny to me? He does have some sort of, guys, let me know what you think. Does he remind you guys a little bit of Hank Brennan? I don't know what it is. There's some similarity. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe I will during this hearing, but there's something that I don't know if there's something that they look kind of similar or talk. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think.
Abide by that. We may want to publish some.
Sure, that's no problem, but I can keep the
And I
notebook.
will say they both are very formal, very, very, very by the book, by the rules, but it goes beyond that.
That's not a
Oh,
problem.
yeah, that's intended for your use, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Maybe it's kind of the voice a little bit too.
All right, go right ahead, counsel.
Your Honor, if I may, a
Yeah.
couple of matters before Dr. Russell testified, with Your Honor's permission.
Okay,
One will take 15 seconds and the other will take maybe 3 minutes.
okay, is it something that Dr. Russell can remain in the courtroom for?
It is.
Okay,
And
Sure.
if at any point I'm incorrect in that assumption, I'm sure you will tell me.
okay,
First of all, the first order is I want to thank the court for granting my permission to practice before the court.
okay,
Now, the reason he's saying that is because remember, he was admitted pro hoc vice because he's out of state. And even though that is the type of thing that is like pretty much never denied, right? That like I remember when they first made that motion, the defense made the motion for him to appear pro hoc vice, and it was like taking Judge Bev a long time to respond, and it was like that's weird because normally this is a no-brainer, but like Judge Bev is, you know, a category of her own where she takes her time to respond, you know. But see, he knows. He knows. This is what I'm saying. Like somebody tipped him off because she's different, and you know he's in her court. He's on her turf. She's the queen of the courtroom, you know. Or queen and king, maybe in her opinion. And so he's very grateful that she allowed it, even though normally that's like just par for the course.
And I'll strive to comport myself to honor the opportunity I've been given.
Thank you.
Secondly, with regard to the decision that Your Honor rendered with regard to our opposition to the motion, the reason I just wanted to raise that briefly is I wanted to make sure that I properly discharge my role in terms of a record. It won't be a long soliloquy, but I just wanted to point out to Your Honor the basis for why I am having this colloquy with the court.
Okay, is it in addition to what you have in your writings?
It is.
Or is it, okay, so that I'll let you talk about, but
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the substance of the writings.
Okay.
I understand Your Honor has decided in that regard.
So this is making a record as to the fact that they need to have a Daubert hearing or not, because you're going to hear him, and I believe we will also hear Mr. Brennan respond.
So, and thank you, Your Honor.
Hi,
The
Stevie
first
B,
point
you're here.
is rooted.
Big shout out to Stevie B. I believe Stevie B usually joins us for the Coburger. And in case you didn't see, that IGG is going to be tonight. But so glad you're here. Welcome. Welcome to the Squirrel Crew as it pertains to Karen Reed. Happy to see you.
In the Commonwealth versus Downs case, which is 31 Mass App Court 467, 1991. And the short of it for that case, which is toward the end of the case, which it was a matter very similar procedurally to this, where there was a request for reconsideration. The court took on that question of reconsideration. And what happened was the appellate court stated that it would be important, and I'm trying to discharge my duty as an officer of the court, but also for an advocate, to put on the record, right, the decision with the basis for the decision with regard to it.
sure, I know, I have no problem with you doing this. You don't need to apologize for.
Yes, Noni Lady, also welcome if you're new here. Glad to see you. Yes, this is Karen's new attorney, Mr. Alessi, and this is his first appearance before this court and Judge Canoni, and he made sure to let her know he was very grateful that she's allowing him to appear pro hoc vice from the great state of New York.
Making a record. I have no
Okay.
problem.
Thank you. So I'll get right to it. So my request is, in accordance with Downs, that there be placed on the record some explanation for the decision. I would appreciate that. And then secondly, the second and last part of it is our expectation coming into the hearing is based on Commonwealth versus Addy, which is 79 Mass Appellate Court 835, 2011. And the short of that case, Your Honor, is it was a Daubert Lanigan motion, very, very much similar to the procedural posture of this motion, where the court set a Daubert Lanigan hearing. The party who was in support of the expert testimony then was given the opportunity to oppose the motion, and this is what the court said. The court stated that in response to the motion, the Commonwealth, and it was opposite because the Commonwealth was supporting the testimony, says in response to the motion, the Commonwealth submitted Trooper Sanford's collision reconstruction report. Then I'm going to skip down to the nub of it. At the motion hearing.
One thing I just have to say, because it just came to my mind. Remember, guys, as they're going through all this with Dr. Russell, think about the first trial and think about Trooper Paul. Sorry, I can't even say it laughing. Think about Trooper Paul and that he was admitted as an expert. Sorry. On accident reconstruction. Okay. And then we're going to see just how hard, especially because, again, most of what we're going to watch today is the cross. We're going to see just how hard Hank Brennan goes at Dr. Russell. And it's like, imagine, though, like, I mean, yeah, Trooper Paul wouldn't have made it through one question. Anyway, all right.
After reading Trooper Sanford's report.
Interesting. Stevie B did not follow the first trial. Okay. Do you know anything about this case? Because I'm happy to give a little bit of a background, and I'm sure people in the chat as well will be happy to answer any questions. But as I always say, no squirrel left behind. This trial is really, really, I will just say in general, like, I think this trial was really, really important because I know for a lot of people who watch trials, this might have been, perhaps, maybe, let me know in the chat if you agree, one of the first trials that a lot of trial watchers or people have followed, or even people who maybe didn't watch trials, right? But then this came along and kind of changed things. This might be one of the first trials for a lot of people where there was a large number of people who really fully believed that this defendant was factually innocent. So not just not guilty, but factually innocent. And so there was a lot of support for Karen Read. And there ended up being quite a bit of controversy because a lot of the people involved in this, whom the Commonwealth called as witnesses in their case in chief, were witnesses to the events of that evening and also are in law enforcement. And it goes on from there. There are some people who maybe think that she was framed, but basically the first trial the first trial ended up with a hung jury, so there was a mistrial. Ended up with a hung jury. And then after the fact, many of the jurors reached out to the defense to let them know, hey, we were unanimous on the lead charge, in this case, the lead charge being second-degree murder. We were all unanimous there, and that should have been put on the record, and it wasn't. And there's a whole lot that goes into that. There's a lot. Judge Cannoni is controversial in and of herself. There's a lot of really specific rules to Massachusetts that are, people I'm sure can elaborate on this, but just let me know how far you want me to go into the background. But okay, you have a good idea, but didn't watch the trial. Okay, cool. Well, you know what? You're in good shape because again, we're going to get to watch the whole trial all over again, and it's probably going to be very different. Because they brought in that special prosecutor to replace, just for anyone who hasn't seen this, the Lally bird, as I call him, because he squawks. So here's the Lally bird. That's his closing argument tie, his actual closing argument tie. Yes, I put it on the Lally bird. He has been appearing at these hearings and just sitting there like a bump on a log while the new special prosecutor, Hank Brennan, has done all the heavy lifting and all the talking. So this will be very different. But again, you'll have that opportunity. And that trial is now slated for April 1st, April Fool's Day of 2025.
Listening to the arguments of counsel, the judge decided not to hold an evidentiary hearing and ruled that Trooper Sanford's opinion was admissible at trial because there was a factual basis for his opinion and it was therefore reliable.
That is something, thank you for mentioning that, Noni lady, because that is something that is worth mentioning. If anyone didn't watch the trial, you may not know this, the solo cups. The solo cups. At that point, it's like, what are we doing here? And in fact, I've got a thing for this. Let me just make sure I've got my command. And especially because Massachusetts has specific rules that we actually cover, Rule 27B, that says that they should be polling the jury. It might be cup singular. Let me just see. Because I've got a funny little clip here as it pertains to the solo cups. The red solo cups is, should pop up. It's either cup or cups. There it is. Okay, let me play this very, 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 very short little clip. That's funny as it pertains to the cups. Where is it? Here it is.
You would use a solo cup.
I'm sorry, what?
Objection, Your Honor.
Solo cup.
Just real quick, I've also got this one coming from Lally himself. It's a good one.
There's no evidence of anything in this case.
Okay. Also, I've got a music video that I made based on this first trial before I knew there was gonna be a second trial. But it's basically Get Low, like the rap song or whatever from what is it? The early 2000s. It's Get Low, Canton style. It's pretty funny. If anyone wants to see that, let me know. We can watch it. Anyway.
The reason I bring that up, Your Honor, is just to state what my expectation was and why I went in the manner that I did. And of course, Mr. McDermott was gracious enough to send an email that said, hey, if you want to change what the court expects the hearing to be, you need an affidavit and you need a motion, and that's what I did. So in conclusion, Your Honor, it is the position of the defense that the papers that we submitted, and I won't get into the argument, would obviate the need for an evidentiary hearing, much in the way that the Addy case obviated, where the party was given an opportunity to make the arguments.
So basically what's happening here is he's saying there shouldn't be a need for this. We shouldn't need to do this. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to here he is, Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan. So remember, guys, he is a defense attorney at heart. We will see that very much today. But he was brought in as a special prosecutor, very similarly, for anyone who followed the Baldwin trial, very similar to Carrie Morrissey, right? She's a defense attorney. She was brought in as a special prosecutor. And the other thing I'm going to talk about more today, too, is this cross-examination, okay, of this expert, I think gives us some insight as to why, A, they brought in a special prosecutor. Well, I guess that's kind of obvious because Lally, but B, why they brought him in specifically as a special prosecutor. And I'll have some thoughts on that too.
Your Honor, I believe you have the discretion to make the decision that a Lanigan hearing is appropriate. I didn't have the benefit, but Your Honor certainly had the benefit of a voir dire prior to trial. Your Honor had the benefit of watching the trial testimony. Your Honor had the benefit of appreciating that it wasn't Rule 14 that was complied with.
Shout out to you, Glad you're here, my friend.
The report was provided nearly 2 days ago on December 10th. And that report, if the court has an opportunity to see it, is in conflict in many ways with the testimony of the voir dire, and it's in conflict with testimony.
So here's what he's saying. He's saying we need to be having this Daubert hearing because her testimony that she's going to be providing today is in conflict with what she said previously. Ruh-roh, them's fighting words, as they say.
One thing that is constant from the voir dire
through
the report that we received 2 days ago is that there's an absence of methodology. There is no basis.
What did I say? For those of you guys who weren't here at the very beginning of the live stream and are just joining us, we went through the different factors, and what did I say we were going to hear a lot about? The methodology. So he's already saying right from the get-go, there's an absence of methodology. Okay.
Methodology to support the opinions that have been provided by this witness. And that fundamentally supports the decision that the defense should meet their burden to be compelled to provide a witness.
Compelled to provide a witness.
See if they can satisfy the Lanigan Daubert standard.
Okay.
Your Honor, did he delve into the substance? I don't plan on belaboring it, but if I could just be heard.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The methodology, and if we're going to go to the testimony, you will, of course, everyone will hear it firsthand, was established the first time. It's pattern recognition. It's well established in the law. And that was what Dr. Russell testified first trial.
Now we're getting some insight into the methodology, pattern recognition. That's the way she's going to use. That's going to be the basis for her methodology, pattern recognition. Now, why is that smart? I think that's smart because, as we know, right, forensic odontology, like I said earlier, went the way of the dinosaur. And you don't really want to be using those words so much, I don't think. So staying away from that and keeping it more broad into pattern recognition, that does two things. One, it steers clear of that odontology specific, field, but also that can apply, as it should here, to the pattern recognition from a car accident, right? If you get hit by a car and you get hit on your arm, the pattern recognition, so it pertains to both. It pertains to potential bite marks, claw marks, right? But it also can pertain to what should you see as a pattern if someone is actually hit by a car.
That's in her report. And as we're to proceed, that's what will happen. That's first. Your Honor, it was a rule. The trigger for the last time was a Rule 14. But Your Honor, in the June 20th transcript on pages 59 and 62 said, on 59, Your Honor said.
So they're still just, this is really just for the record. We know there's going to be a Daubert hearing. I'm going to jump ahead to where they start because we know they're going to have the Daubert hearing. And this is them just sort of making their record about this. So, and then let's see if she's going to say something.
So based on everything,
here
in my discretion, we're having a hearing.
Understood,
Okay.
Your Honor.
There are your findings.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So you all set to go?
I am all set to go, Your
All right.
Honor.
Go right ahead, Mr. Alessi.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to, so Need Some Z says, I love that the defense did a long day direct. Absolutely. Yep. I agree. But it is a bit, for those of us who have already seen the first trial or even just the voir dire, it's a lot of the same. So we're not going to watch all of it. We're going to watch a little bit just to get a feel for the flavor of his questioning and his style, because I do love his style, but I really want to focus on cross. So because that was for me the most surprising thing of all of it on this day.
Good morning, Dr. Russell.
Good morning.
And you'll keep your voice up. That would be helpful to all. Please state your name, your full name, and spell your last name.
Yes. Marie Russell, Russell.
Now, at a high level, what is your professional background?
I'm an emergency physician.
And do you have anything else in terms of your professional background in addition to being an emergency room physician?
Yes, I'm
She has all of the things.
also a trained forensic pathologist.
Your Honor, may I interrupt for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Surprising good or surprising bad? We'll talk about that when we get there. Had a little bit.
Thank you for that, Your
Well,
Honor.
go right ahead.
How long have you been an emergency room physician?
I've been an emergency department physician since 1987, so that is over 30 years.
How long have you been a forensic pathologist?
I've been a forensic pathologist for about 31 years.
So
Already, guys, that is unique. How oftentimes, I would say probably never, far from her, have you guys seen where there's someone who's like an emergency, like an expert, like an emergency room physician, but also forensic pathologist? Already, that's crazy, but it gets crazier. Sorry.
you've been an emergency room physician and a fellowship trained forensic pathologist, both of those for 30 plus years.
Correct.
Do you have a medical license?
Yes.
She gets all of them.
When were you first licensed to practice medicine?
In 1988 in California.
And what licenses do you currently hold?
I hold medical licenses in California, New York, Idaho.
Idaho. Whoa.
And in California, what are you technically licensed? What is the documentation of the license you have? Your license as a what?
Physician and surgeon in California.
A physician and surgeon? Did you say?
Surgeon. Surgeon, people. Yeah.
Your Honors, I'm sure you know, but I want to make sure I get your protocol correctly. We've pre-marked, Mr. Brennan and I have agreed to the exhibits. We've agreed to both the pre-marking and to the
I think this is smart. And again, I think somebody tipped him off because remember the trouble they had in the first trial where they had both parties had already marked everything and then Judge Bev changed the way they had to do it and it caused a whole disaster. Like they had already done it a certain way so it would expedite everything. And then she's like, oh, let's change it. And then it was like every exhibit took forever. So I think it's funny that he's mentioning this.
admissibility of each exhibit. And I can never either tell you how I understand I'm to go or Your Honor can state it.
So these are in evidence.
Yes.
So use them as if they're in evidence.
Thank you. Appreciate that. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So he's just going to approach with her CV.
Is the most recent one.
Yes.
I now want to get into your educational background with a little bit of sprinkling of experience.
I love that he said sprinkling. I died when he said that because this just came up recently with the Shanna Gardner coverage that I've been doing where where Detective Johns at the bond hearing used the word sprinkle. And then I paused it and I started laughing. I was like laughing about the word sprinkle. And then right after that, Jose Baez was like, I like your word sprinkle. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use your word sprinkling. And this just happened on from where we are at that coverage. And then then you have this against with the sprinkling. So I was like, yes.
Going into it. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at MIT and Northeastern University.
MIT.
Approximately when did you attend Massachusetts Institution of Technology?
From 1972 to 1974.
I've got a
And
violin.
what did you study at MIT?
I took pre-med courses
Did you obtain a degree from MIT?
Med.
Why not?
because my mother got sick. She developed cancer and I went back to New York.
And after that experience, did you go back to college?
Yes.
Where did you go?
Northeastern University.
And what years did you attend Northeastern University?
Part-time from 1974 to 1981.
And did you obtain a degree from Northeastern
We're going to hear about up until the part where she talks about being a cop, and then we'll probably go ahead and jump on to Cross.
University?
Yes.
And what degree was that?
That was a Bachelor of Science degree with highest honors.
After college, did
With
you
highest
go on to
honors.
receive a Doctor of Medicine?
Yes.
Where?
At the University of Massachusetts in Worcester,
When?
1987.
Now let's go into
Thank you,
residencies,
Reverend.
internships, and fellowships. Did you complete any residencies?
Yes.
What residencies did you complete?
All of
I
them.
completed a residency in emergency medicine, followed by a residency in anatomic pathology.
What is anatomic pathology?
Another thing we're going to learn too that's interesting is the difference between a residency and a fellowship, because I don't know that I've ever heard that explained before. Any of you guys who work in the medical field might know, but I feel like I usually hear them used interchangeably by experts, but we're going to hear the difference.
Anatomic pathology is the study. It's a division of pathology. It's a subset of pathology, and it's a division that deals with diseases that can be diagnosed by looking at tissues and bodily fluids.
And what is emergency medicine? Although most all of us have that experience, could you just briefly describe what emergency medicine is?
Well, emergency medicine is a field of medicine that deals with acute injuries and injuries of people.
In terms of the
Your
residencies,
world, people. Be careful.
briefly describe what was involved. What did you do in those residencies? And now let's start out with emergency medicine.
Emergency medicine was a very intense residency. It was a combined internship and residency that lasted for 4 years, and I was at one of the busiest trauma centers in the United States. We would routinely see patients in the emergency room, and some months we rotated outside the emergency room to various subspecialty clinics and areas like the ICU, for instance. In the emergency medicine department, we worked all different shifts. We saw numerous patients because it was a very busy facility, and we saw anything that ranged from gunshot wounds, stab wounds, beatings, down to runny noses.
And
Can you imagine going to the emergency room for runny nose?
where was specifically those residencies? What facility? What is the name of it?
It was at the Los Angeles County USC Medical Center, which people formerly knew as the General Hospital, the 19-story General Hospital from Los Angeles.
And did that have a certain level designation with regard to the type of trauma that would come to those facilities?
Yes, it's a level 1 trauma center, which is the highest level that can be achieved.
So that matters, right? Because what we're going to hear about, I believe we'll still hear about it before we jump across, but that, in other words, whatever patients they already had, they would have patients like essentially sent over from other hospitals that didn't have level 1 trauma. So that adds to how they were like the busiest hospital on the planet type thing. Or in the country, maybe.
In terms of the residencies, in terms of anatomic pathology, what did you, where was that residency? Which facility?
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because they do go quite detailed into this. Okay, let's just see.
Oh, in forensic pathology?
Yes.
Forensic pathology.
Did autopsies. So it was a very organized training program, which included 1 to 2 autopsies a day, mostly 2, and as well as lectures, seminars, interesting case conferences, many things. During that time, I was sent to the FBI for a specific case series.
That one's easy. I don't know that actually came up in the first trial. She was sent to the FBI. Oh, at the beginning.
So it was very intense. And in terms of the autopsies, I autopsied cases that were gunshot wounds, stab wounds, many homicides, many homicides, accident victims, car accidents, people hit by cars, people stabbed, child abuse,
stabbed by
a wide range. And the goal was to give the fellows the widest range of experiences.
And can you estimate how many autopsies you performed during your fellowship?
Oh, I know for a fact that I performed over 500.
And that was over a 2-year period?
Correct.
So you're performing then an autopsy almost every other day? Is that correct?
1 to 2 autopsies a day.
1 to 2 a day.
Yes.
And what at its core are you doing in terms of an autopsy as a forensic pathologist?
You know, the autopsy is just part of what the forensic pathologist does, which is death investigation. So a forensic pathologist looks at a person's, well, just the body is one part of it. The external exam, sometimes, some cases, not all cases get an autopsy actually that go to the medical examiner's office. But there's a death investigation which involves a detailed external examination plus an examination of the circumstances of how the decedent was found.
The reason she's mentioning this is because this matters here, right? Because part of the issue with, as it pertains to this case with John O'Keefe, is that just by looking at the injuries isn't going to help here, right? Because it's kind of like we don't really, I mean, there's different theories of what happened depending on which party you ask, the state or the defense. But, you know, this is definitely one where the crime scene and the circumstances really, really, really matter. Yeah, so.
Interviews with police officers and others when appropriate, interviews with their doctors, and examination photos if available.
I mean, and again, adding to it too, just her expertise, right? Again, thinking along lines of emergency medicine, the fact that she has experience with people coming to the emergency room for car accidents and for dog bites, but also we can't forget the forensic pathologist experience, right? Because All that plays into, again, you can't find an expert. I mean, usually if you have a forensic pathologist, that's literally all they've done. I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing. That's normal, right? How rare to have someone who has all this experience, because she can kind of look at this big picture and go big picture, but she can also go detailed from top to bottom throughout the entire thing, right? Starting with the circumstances of the death, and again, things like the crime scene because of the death investigation experience, and then the nature of the injuries and the patterns and what could have caused it. What does this look like? But she can also go all the way down through, cause and manner of death. So.
Earlier in your testimony, you said you have over 30 years of experience as a forensic pathologist.
Crazy.
When was the last time you engaged in the practice of medicine pertaining to forensic pathology?
This year.
And have you had a continuous or non-continuous practice in forensic pathology?
Continuous.
And we're going to get to that later on as appropriate. Not as appropriate. We're going to get to it later on. Do you have any affiliations with professional organizations?
All of them.
Yes.
Can you name?
We're going to skip all of them. We'll just go ahead a little bit because, again, like literally everything, all of the things. She's given presentations. She does all of the fancy things, specialized training. Again, it's like perhaps the most qualified expert. Okay, now they're just talking about her CV. Like, is she reading from it? Kind of reminiscent of Deputy Heard. But, the thing is with her, her CV is so long and she's done so many things. You can't blame her for not being able to remember it all because it's too many things. She's so overqualified. There's no way you can remember it all. So, okay.
In the emergency room.
Oh,
Black
yes.
Widow, here,
Yes.
shout out to Black
We'll
Widow.
get into more of that detail. As a forensic pathologist for 30 plus years, did you
Change the picture again.
see decedents and living patients who had been the subject of motor vehicle accidents?
Many.
And in terms of forensic pathology, are patients always deceased?
By the way, guys, so for members of the Squirrel Crew who are who've been here a while or who are regulars, sort of in the chat, for those who want, we have custom commands as through Nightbot for people who want one. So for anyone who's new who is interested, let me know, and I will pass the note along to Nightbot. It can be anything from a quote or a funny saying or just whatever. Everybody has their own that they get to pick. So just let me know for anyone who's new if you are interested, and Nightbot will get to work.
Deceased, or does the field of forensic pathology also address living persons?
Yes. The field of forensic pathology as a broad field, yes, can deal with living people. Some offices,
Now, I
some
find
government
that
offices will choose.
that is interesting that the field of forensic pathology can deal with living people. Interesting. I have not heard that before because usually you think autopsies, but yeah.
To restrict their involvement to deceased people only.
Okay.
But it's a broad field. It does involve living people too.
Now let's move to expert witness experience in courtrooms. You understand?
I'm going to jump through this because she's done all the things. Board certification. Works as a consultant. Okay, medical examinations. And sometimes he'll kind of go back to topics he's already covered a little bit and go deeper into those. Okay. This is worth listening to.
The chief medical executive for one of the major prisons.
What years
So
approximately?
now we're getting into her experience running the prison systems in terms of the hospitals at the prison, which this is separate but equal to her experience as a law enforcement officer. But again, this is just so when you have this much experience, it's like they combined her experience in law enforcement with her experience in the medical field to where this was a really good position for her to be in charge of the the trauma department at the prison.
Did you serve in that role as chief medical executive of the California State Prison at Corcoran?
Yeah.
From 2018 to 2018 to 2023.
What was your role? What did you do?
Well, the chief medical executive is in charge of the whole medical department. And so in that role, I had a lot of duties, including supervising the medical care of all of the patients, the inmates, conducting various committees. I chaired many committees, process improvement, pharmacy therapeutics, death committee. I investigated every single death that occurred at the prison during that time period.
Let's stop
So you can imagine her workload, right?
there, if we could, please.
Yes.
And talk about from 2018 to 2020 is what I heard you say was your time period. Describe what was a death review at Corcoran that you performed.
Yes. The death review at Corcoran was quite extensive. And so what would happen, well, first of all, let me give you background. Background is that the patients die from a variety of causes in prison system, including suicide, homicide, natural death, overdoses, a wide variety of reasons people die. So my job was to investigate those deaths. And the way I did that was when these inmates or patients were taken to the emergency area, when they were found unresponsive, taken to the emergency area, if I was there, in the building, that's where my office was, I would go and personally examine these patients from head to toe.
In that personal examination from head to toe, did you ever experience any patients with wounds?
Yes.
Describe some of the wounds that you experienced that were the subject of your death review.
Well, there were a variety of wounds, and some of the most common ones were stab wounds or blunt force trauma wounds, contusions, and or commonly known as bruises.
You go ahead a little bit. They're just going through the different wounds. Oh, this part actually, I think let's hear this part real quick.
Bring up their arms to protect their face, neck, chest area, head area from the assault. So defensive wounds are commonly seen in the arm, the forearm, the posterior portion of the forearm, or the hands also.
Okay. When I heard this, I thought to myself, this could be one of the most important things that she could testify to at this upcoming trial that maybe flew under the radar for a lot of people. And here's why. Because here's why this is so valuable. What she's saying is that when you see injuries to arms, that oftentimes, especially when it's the posterior portion of the arm, that it is a defensive wound because somebody puts their arms up to block an injury. And that makes perfect sense. And that, and again, that could be true for whether it's a gunshot or a stabbing or whatever the case may be, right? A dog, right? That you put your arm up to protect yourself. And the thing is where are you going to see that a lot? Emergency room, right? Exactly what one of her many fields of expertise is. And so why is that so important here? Because we're dealing with potential like theory from the defense of a dog bite, right? But also if the defense were to want to not maybe be so specific, but just imply defensive wound, right? Such as like maybe from a person, right? That could apply there as well. Now, what it wouldn't apply to is being surprisingly backed into by a car because you wouldn't see that coming. So I think that's really crucial. So Stevie B saying, most think of pathology pertaining to death, so mapping the person's death, disease pathology. Right. Yeah, definitely. And I guess because forensic pathology, I guess in my mind, I always associate that with death. But again, it's really more like investigating. People don't have to die. Like a forensic like psychologist or whatever, right? So, but yes, thank you for that. And again, we love it when people have different backgrounds in the chat and they can offer information based on their own. We've got a lot of different people, really smart people that like to that help and provide us with information and context. So I appreciate that as well. But hopefully you guys see what I mean by the importance of that, like being able to testify to just in general, when you see injuries to this portion of the arm, typically what is it from? And she's saying it's defensive wounds more often than not. So.
Did you ever have to determine whether a wound was defensive when either the patient was unresponsive or the patient was deceased?
Many times.
Mm-hmm.
Is it many times for both, or is it many times for one of those two?
Well, definitely when the patient was deceased.
So let's stop there. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's start. So many times, do you have an approximate number of how many times?
Okay, now why is this important? Because it might seem like it's kind of like getting into, they have to get into the very detailed information for the sake of the Daubert hearing. But why does this question matter? Because remember, methodology, right? Establishing that methodology. We heard from the state saying that there's a lack of methodology. And what we're going to hear is her talking about the pattern, right? Pattern recognition. And so the idea that you can look at the injuries to the arm and whether the person is deceased or not, right? If they're unable to tell you what happened, her job would be to look at these wounds, right? And be able to figure out what happened, even though they can't tell you. And what does that mean? It means that you figure it out based on the patterns, right?
In your 5 years at Corcoran, you determined whether a wound was a defensive wound on a deceased patient, approximately.
Not very many.
Counsel, could we get an answer as to how many death reviews total were done last year?
Yes, Your Honor, I will ask that question right now. How many death reviews did you perform? And if you want to do it based upon per year, average month, whatever gives the court the best, most accurate answer.
Okay. Well, on average, we had 1 death per month. So some of those occurred at nighttime. But I reviewed all the cases, but he didn't personally examine every single case.
Right.
Over 35 got a very intensive exam.
So if I did my math correctly, it's 60, right? It's 12 times 5. You were there 5 years?
For death reviews.
For death
yes.
reviews, and that was the court's question.
Yes.
Right. Was there anybody else at Corcoran doing death reviews?
There was a committee that I formed to review deaths. It didn't exist when I first got there, but it did get formed later on.
Were there any other physicians on the committee that, so you were the only physician on the committee in Corcoran that was performing the death reviews or not?
No, I misspoke. There was one other physician, the person who was my assistant, who also needed to be involved in those death reviews in case I wasn't around.
Did you ever need to consult with any medical examiner's office in connection with your death reviews at Corcoran?
I frequently consulted with the local Kings County Medical Examiner's Office.
Describe examples of that consultation and interaction.
Okay, so I would conduct my initial part of the review, and I would call, on some cases, not every single case, but on some cases, call the Kings County Medical Examiner's Office and speak to them to alert them to certain findings or certain things that I wanted them to specifically look for in their examination.
Did that consultation include any consultation regarding wounds and the source and nature of the wounds?
I don't recall.
Now let's go to your emergency medicine physician experience at LAC plus USC. Do you have a shorthand that you would like to use so I don't have to say that every time?
I don't.
All right. So I'll just say LAUSC. Would that be something that would work?
I say LAC USC.
I'll say LAC USC also. So what years were you an emergency medicine physician at LAC USC?
I was there as an emergency intern, resident, and physician from 1987 to 2016.
So if, again, I did my math right, it's about 29 years.
Yes.
And you've described previously that that facility was a level 1 trauma center, correct?
Yes, it was.
What is a level 1 trauma center?
A level 1 trauma center is the highest level that the trauma center could be. So it means it has in-house neurosurgeon, in-house orthopedic surgeon, an active research program, and obviously in-house trauma surgeons.
What did you do as an emergency medicine physician at that facility from 1987 to 2016? I'm sure it's a lot, but if you could give some representative examples.
Well, we staffed both the major and minor areas of the emergency department where the patients were brought into. So any patient that was brought in with major trauma or, even non-trauma, medical condition, a heart attack or stroke would be brought into the emergency department, and we would provide the initial examination, screening, resuscitation, whatever was needed. And then if the patient needed to go to the operating room, we would call the surgeons, and if they needed to go to the ICU, we would stabilize them and send them to the ICU.
In addition to diagnosing and treating that we've all experienced with the unfortunate, with all respect, having to go to the emergency medicine department, did you engage in any surgery in the emergency medicine department? And if you could describe what you mean if the answer is yes.
Yes.
Describe what it is that you did that constituted surgery at the emergency medicine department from 1987 to 2016. We're going to get into more specifics apropos to the issue at case here, but just looking for what, when we say that you did surgery, want to give an idea of what that is.
Okay, so we did what is considered minor surgery. We sewed up, we debrided and sewed up lacerations, repaired lacerations. We incised certain infected wounds and cut them open. So is that what you mean?
Yes, thank you. So now moving, and we're going to come back to some of that, but now moving on to the next position that you had at the LAC USC Jail Medical Services. Can you describe what the name of that position was?
Yes, I was jail medical director.
And approximately what time period were you jail medical director at LAC USC?
Okay, before I answer that, I'd like to say that in addition, so we generally had a clinical role and an administrative role. So there were several things going on at the same time. In terms of jail medical director, as the administrative role, I was doing that from 2003 to 2014.
And can you describe the in-custody unit that was there that you provided this role that you just described?
Yes, we had an unusual situation where we had, in addition to the regular major emergency department, we also had a specially dedicated emergency, combination of emergency, inpatient, and outpatient area for patients that were incarcerated.
Crazy here.
So the patients would be brought directly up to the jail emergency department for their injury.
So Stevie B has a question here. I also don't ever understand the need to go through pretrial motions again. Why not only hear any new evidence? Okay, I see what you're saying. Right. I see what you're saying. Right. So because they never were able to have a full-on Daubert hearing with her because she was brought to the attention of the defense team during the trial. And out of like just sort of like somebody knew somebody and they recommended her. And so they were actually almost to the end of the Commonwealth case in chief to begin the defense case in chief when this happened. And so this was sort of like a last minute, like they brought her in. They only had time for like, I guess it was really more of just a voir dire. And because of that, her testimony was limited in scope. She wasn't able to get into all of the things that she's an expert at, which is a lot, right? Especially as it pertains to like the dog bites. She really just kind of got into just more general emergency care and whatnot. I mean, her voir dire was probably only an hour or two, if I recall, because on that day, they voir dired her as well as the ARCA dudes who work for the FBI or were hired by the FBI as a third party. And so, this is way more in depth. So that they can have, in hopes of having her testify as an expert and expand her what she's able to testify to. But additionally, what I will say is this, even though this is a really good question, and I understand what you're saying, when it's a new trial, everything starts anew. So anything that was already done gets done again. And that's even if you don't have new attorneys on the case, which in this case, you've got new attorneys on both sides. Of course, we have the new special prosecutor, Hank Brennan. We have Mr. Alessi for the defense. But even still, it's as if it's starting over afresh. It's brand new. It's for the first time. Even if you don't have changes to the attorneys, that's just how it goes. So, but thank you for the question, because I'm sure you're not the only one who had that question.
Injuries, if they were hemodynamically stable. What I mean by that is if their blood pressure and pulse were stable, they'd be brought directly up to the emergency department.
And what type of agencies would bring those types of patients to that department?
The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Los Angeles Police Department, the California Highway Patrol, local area, any of the local police departments in LA County were eligible to bring their patients there.
And briefly describe the volume of patients that would be brought into that department.
It was very busy. Just the emergency department alone was 20 to 30 patients a day, just for the jail emergency department. And then the inpatient area depended on the year, because it was about 40 patients, inpatients, and over the years that decreased a little bit.
Did you ever have a role with regard to emergency medicine quality improvement at LAC USC?
Yes, I was chairman of the committee for a period of time.
And do you remember approximately when that was?
I'd have to refer to the CV, sorry.
Would around 2000 to 2003 be approximately an accurate time?
Yes.
What did you do as the Director of Emergency Medicine Quality Improvement?
So for that role, I was in charge of quality improvement projects and how they were progressing, during the interim, as well as I investigated all the deaths in the main emergency department and the jail emergency department.
Now, the title has in it quality improvement.
Yes.
Well, I'll say, especially as it pertains to this trial, again, oftentimes they don't have to have anything different, but they're going to start over. But in this case, there are actually a lot of other differences too, in the sense that for the first trial, both parties have asked for a continuance. There was a joint motion for a continuance. And Judge Bev, being the judge that she is, said nope. And one of the reasons they wanted a continuance is because there was some discovery that they felt like they hadn't finished fully going through, or they were waiting on certain things to come back. So in addition to the things I just mentioned, right, such as Dr. Russell having a larger scope for her test, potentially, right, for her testimony, the different attorneys. In addition to that, things that we've already learned so far in these recent hearings for this upcoming new trial are that there's evidence, apparently, that they are finding that they didn't have for the first trial. Like, for example, there were, it was denied, but the state wanted to, or the Commonwealth wanted to get into Karen's family's phone records. But one of the big things has to do with the car, the Lexus, okay? Because it was a disaster in the first trial. And what happened was they thought they couldn't get certain information, but apparently, I don't know if it was Trooper Paul or Trooper Green or both. They used the wrong reader on it. I mean, I'm face palming. They used the wrong reader to try to interpret the data. So basically, there was a lot of data that they couldn't access. So for this new trial, one of the big differences is going to be they're attempting to retrieve that data by doing a chip on. So you may have heard before of chip off. So they had already done a chip off, and usually that means the data is destroyed. But the Commonwealth is attempting to do a chip on. So you re-chip the chips together, right? So they can now access this data and use the proper reader. And so there very well may be a lot more new information as it pertains to the Lexus in this case. And also another thing is Mr. Brennan has said that he intends to really slim down the witness list. And so I don't know that we're going to be hearing from like so much of the McAlberts and whatnot, as they're known colloquially. So it'll be a very different trial. I think the evidence will be different, but also just everything's going to be different, really. Good morning, Aaron. Glad you're here. Yay. Yay. Fender's also here. I'm so glad to see you guys. 1 minute summary. We are watching the Daubert hearing of Dr. Russell, who I know you're a big fan of. Fender, for anyone who doesn't know, Fender is a psychologist in India. This Daubert hearing was on December 12th, but we are, no what if any. Exactly, another difference. No what if any. Very true, very true. Yeah, Lally hasn't said a peep. So we are still right at the beginning of the direct examination. We're not going to watch all the direct. We're just hearing a little bit of her background because they go more into it than they did before. But the cross is the exciting part, mostly, in my opinion, of this Daubert. And the day didn't finish. For anyone who hasn't heard, they did not get to finish. They spent the whole day. They have to finish this Daubert hearing on January 7th. So 1 minute summary. We are just still at the beginning part of the qualifications of Dr. Russell. But she's being questioned by Karen Reed's new defense attorney, Mr. Alessi, who they brought in from New York. So hopefully that helps.
That in order to be a director of quality improvement, you have to understand well the underlying practice to understand what needs to be improved?
Yes.
And did you believe that you had that high level of understanding?
Yes.
And did you exercise that high level of understanding in that role?
Yes.
Now, before that, did you have any experience with life support training at LAC USC?
Yes, I was the director of the life support training center.
And was that also around late 1990s, 2000 time period?
Yes.
And what was your role? What did you do as director of Center for Life Support and Training at LAC USC?
So we provided all of the life support courses that were taught at the institution, including advanced cardiac life support, advanced trauma life support, which was taught to the surgeons and emergency physicians, and pediatric life support.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Have you ever been an adjunct professor?
Yes.
When and where?
I believe the dates were 1998 to 2003 at the California State University at Los Angeles.
And what did you teach at Cal State Los Angeles?
I taught a graduate level course called legal medicine, which was part of their master's degree program.
And that's a graduate program, correct?
Yes.
And what were the students in the grad program there for? Was there a certain title that they were referred to as?
Yes, it was a graduate program in criminalistics, and so many of them were crime lab employees or headed to work at a crime lab.
And just briefly, can you give just examples of some of the topics you taught to those that were in this criminalistics program?
Yes, so I was teaching the medical course, and so I had to teach a wide range of topics about forensic medicine to these people who would be going to crime scenes and seeing deceased bodies, etc. So my topics included things like time of death, blunt force trauma, sharp force trauma, burns, wounds. I did teach about wounds and including, and so a wide variety of wounds.
Let's focus in on wounds. Okay. Describe in some detail the type of wound analysis and treatment you taught as an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles.
Well, there was no treatment taught to those students as opposed to the emergency students, emergency medicine doctors. But the types of wounds that I talked about in the legal medicine course included, again, sharp force, blunt force, thermal. I talked about bite wounds in terms of identifying bite wounds on a deceased body. I talked about wounds that people would see in child abuse, domestic violence, elder abuse.
And in your teaching, let's break that down. In your teaching of dog, is it fair to say dog-inflicted human wounds? Is that
All right.
a fair term?
Guess what, guys?
Or would,
Now bite wounds and dogs are entering the conversation.
what would you use?
Mostly bite wounds in general.
Bite wounds? Was that bite wounds from a specific animal or general animals?
No, human, mostly human.
Yes, this is her background still, but it's way more detailed than we've heard before.
I talked about mostly human bite wounds
Okay.
with a reference to animal wounds.
And what was the reference to animal wounds?
Fender, Erin, if Erin is still in the chat, she just popped in. Erin will be able to, I think, answer that question even better than I could because she lives in Minnesota. I believe Minneapolis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Erin, but she lives in Minnesota. But there's things going on. And I think she'll be up to speed on that as well.
Just how they can be differentiated from human bite wounds.
So you taught human bite wounds, but you also taught how to differentiate human bite wounds from dog bite wounds on humans.
Yes.
So let the witness answer that. So ask it in a non-leading way, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Describe what you taught the students on the topic of human wounds and dog bite wounds.
Okay. I taught the students to recognize human bite wounds. So I had pictures, images, and slides on human bite wounds, why they would be important, the forensic value of bite wounds. I mentioned that how they may differ from other bite wounds, such as dog bite wounds. In the emergency department, the focus was a little different.
That's what I wanted to go to next. So describe, well, first, in your many years in the emergency department, and we're going to get to this in more detail. So why don't we just save it until the next category we get to? We'll come back to that. Before you were an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles, and before you were a medical doctor, what did you do for work?
I was a police officer full-time.
Yay,
And
here we go. Here we go.
Approximately when were you a full-time police officer?
From 1977 to 1984 in Massachusetts.
When you started on the police force in Malden, how many women were on the police force?
Before I started, none.
So you were the first woman on the police force in Malden.
Correct.
Before, did you go to academy?
Yes.
Did you graduate successfully from academy?
From the Boston Police Academy, yes.
Before that, did you have any other work experience?
Okay, so that was one of the things I couldn't remember which town or which city. But yes, so for this question, so for Erin, so Fender is in India, and she has a question about what's going on with insurance fuckery. And I figured you might be up to speed on that because you were the first person to mention that to me before I even heard of it anywhere else. And also I had mentioned that you're in Minnesota, but I couldn't remember if you were in Minneapolis, but I think maybe Minneapolis. But either way, I know you're in Minnesota. So I heard Bev. That's funny. That's funny.
Yes, I worked in an emergency room, actually.
Right, but in terms of from the time period, as I understand it, in Malden, if I heard correctly, you said approximately 1997 to 1984 for?
77.
I'm sorry, 77, right. So is it, before that, did you have any other job in the community in Malden?
Well, in the period 1974 to 1977, during that period of time, I worked in the emergency department. I was an EMT and I was an auxiliary police officer.
Let's talk about the EMT experience.
Also
What did you do as an EMT?
I did volunteer work in an ambulance.
And just, again, most of us know what an EMT does, but just for the record, just briefly, what did you do as an EMT?
Generally rendered first aid to calls for emergency service.
Now let's go into the category of your medical training and experience specifically pointed at a certain topic. With regard to wounds, do you have any experience with dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
Much experience.
Let's start and do this chronologically. What professional experience have you had with, we'll call them dog bite, what would you like to call them, dog bites or dog bite wounds? What's your parlance?
Dog bite wounds.
So what's your professional experience going chronologically with dog bite wounds?
He said, "What's your parlance?"
Well, my first experience I recall.
He said, "What's your parlance?" I was not kidding when I said he's very formal. Okay, so that's kind of, now we're getting into the wounds, but here's what I want to do. Now I want to jump to cross. Let me find it. Because they go, this is long, it's very long, okay? But a lot of, what they're going to talk about is going to be kind of distilled in this cross-examination where it's brought under question or whatever, under fire, if you will. And what's going to happen here is this is going to pick up at the very end of direct and then go into cross. So let me just get this ready for you guys with some subtitles and whatnot. If they help, figure it doesn't make anything worse. Or actually, I don't know that this one has it. We'll see. Okay. So yes. Okay.
Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
How did you form that opinion?
Well, I utilized my many years of training experience with wounds in general,
Yes.
and dog bites in specific, and went over the materials quite a few times. And with that, and plus did read up on some literature that I had read in the past and reread again. And that's how
I think what Fender might be asking about is that there's other issues happening with other insurance companies and people making threats and stuff, which wouldn't make sense without knowing what happened with the CEO of United Healthcare. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying, Fender. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. That would be like hundreds and hundreds of dollars in the US, x-rays alone, even if you have insurance, good insurance. Yeah. Yeah. We can give a synopsis of what's going on with that if anyone else is wondering what's going on with United Healthcare, if anyone hasn't heard. But I will say his charges just got upgraded to first degree murder from second degree, which is interesting. And I didn't think any of those aggravating factors were going to apply, but they found the terrorism, and that makes sense. That makes sense.
into the opinion.
Now to get a little bit more specific, did you invoke your pattern recognition methodology in coming to that opinion?
Objection.
You have to ask it differently.
And there it is. There's the methodology, and there's the key terms: pattern recognition methodology. Now that matters because part of what's really going to get brought up and crossed very shortly here is that pattern recognition methodology. Okay, buckle up, guys. We'll be there in just a sec.
Did you employ a methodology in coming to that opinion?
Yes.
What was the methodology, or one of the methodologies, in coming to that opinion?
Well, right away, it was apparent that there was a pattern. So I used my the pattern recognition methodology, plus my many years of training experience to come to this conclusion.
And with regard to the pattern recognition,
Right?
do you have a level of certainty with regard to the pattern that you have recognized in the decedent's wounds on his right arm?
Yes,
What is that level of certainty or certitude?
those wounds are highly characteristic of a dog attack.
How frequent in your experience do you find in wound care that a wound pattern is highly characteristic of a certain source?
I object to a percentage type question.
Can you answer that question, doctor?
I'm not sure I even understand it.
So ask it to me.
Thank you. When you use the phrase highly characteristic, what do you mean by that phrase?
Well, it's very high. If I were to give a percentage,
Please continue.
I would say almost pathognomonic, 90, very high 90s.
Now let's go to differential diagnosis. Did you perform a differential diagnosis in coming to your opinion?
So
Yes.
right now, remember, we jumped ahead. She'd been on direct for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, something. But this is the important part, because he's getting to what are her conclusions, right? What are her final opinions? What's her differential diagnosis? So this is what really matters. Then, of course, it's going to go into cross.
What other considerations did you take into account as to possible other causes of the injuries to the right arm of the decedent?
Well, given the pattern, there were certain things that came to mind right away that I had to rule out, and so I ruled out self-inflicted as an etiology. I don't think he self-inflicted those. The pattern was not characteristic of being struck by a motor vehicle. The pattern was not characteristic of those wounds in particular on the arm of being.
The fact that she said that, now you know why they're going to want to attack her, because she's saying that pattern does not match. Now, having said that, we heard the same thing from the ARCA guys, right? But we're hearing it from her as well. And that's another person to say the same thing.
Inflicted by another person.
You mentioned motor vehicle accident, and earlier in your testimony, you spoke to your experience with observing and treating a lot of motor vehicle accidents. Why did you rule out motor vehicle accident as a potential cause of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
Because he was found outdoors.
And what other reasons? Was there anything about the nature of what was presented in what you reviewed with regard to his injuries that caused you to rule out motor vehicle accident?
I think I misunderstood the previous question.
So, yeah.
Yes. So
Let me start over.
Yes.
Because I am going to take what you said. So let me ask it this way. What caused you to rule out a motor vehicle accident as a cause of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
there were several reasons I ruled it out very quickly. One is that the wounds were not characteristic of anything that I could attribute to a motor vehicle, a certain part of the motor vehicle, the underneath part of the motor vehicle. They were just not characteristic of any particular part of the motor vehicle. Secondly, there were no bruises from the neck down on his body. There was a mark on the hand, which I think I have an explanation for that.
Please.
Which was not a motor vehicle, but I didn't see any bruises or fractures or other blunt injuries that were characteristic of a person being struck by a motor vehicle. And if I could add to that,
Please.
we at the coroner's office forensic pathology program was specifically trained on how to recognize not only if someone was struck by a vehicle, but to even recognize further about what types of vehicles would inflict, what types of wounds, and the locations that we should look for on the body for wounds for someone that's struck by a motor vehicle.
Have you ever taught, in all your career that you were discussing earlier today, how to assess whether an injury to a human has been caused by a motor vehicle?
Yes.
Describe how you taught that in your career.
Well, again, it's oftentimes a pattern. So, for instance, a wound on a certain part of the leg, certain number of inches up from the foot of the leg, could be the result of a bumper, for instance. So we were taught to look for certain patterns and locations of injuries. Also, injury from glass. has a certain pattern
Oh,
on automobile glass. And road rash has another pattern, so.
What are the features of glass from your experience with regard to motor vehicle accidents regarding injuries to humans?
Oh, they often cause what we call dicing injuries, which are another pattern of injuries in lacerations.
Have you made that diagnosis
So
that
another
you just
thing-
described?
Another thing that's interesting is we've already heard from the Commonwealth at one of the previous hearings that they are going to be bringing in an accident reconstruction specialist. So not Trooper Paul. It will be really, really interesting to see what they say about these injuries in terms of how they could be caused from a vehicle. Because before we had Trooper Paul and that was just nonsensical, right? So with an actually qualified person to do that job, what are they going to say? Because we also remember, in addition to Dr. Russell, we also have the ARCA dudes who are literally as qualified as you can be when it comes to the physics. And they also had said it's physically, scientifically impossible for this to come from a car. So it'll be I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Commonwealth brings an expert to try to explain how this came from a car. And why does that matter? Because they have to prove Karen Reed did this, right? This is their whole theory of the case, is that she backed into him with the car. That's their whole theory of the case. So they have to try to prove that a car was involved. And remember, the previous theory was it was like the back tail light, right? I guess I think they have to. I don't think they can go back on that theory, right? Because the whole pieces of tail light was their entire case. And so that's another reason why it was interesting, where she said that it couldn't be from a vehicle. It also couldn't be from glass, because with that tail light, the housing is like plastic, but the inside parts of it are glass. And so that's where the glass matters as well.
As an emergency room physician.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not
Have
calling.
you made
I
that
see
diagnosis?
what you're saying. Can they call Trooper Paul? They can. The defense can call Trooper Paul. The defense can call The defense can call anybody that the state does not call, or people that the state does call. But they can call Trooper Paul. They can call any of those clowns. They can call the dude who collected the red solo cups. And I would imagine they will.
As a forensic pathologist,
Yes.
describe how you've made that diagnosis as a forensic pathologist with a post-mortem individual.
So again, it's pattern recognition.
One moment, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you need the question
No,
repeated?
no,
Please.
it's pattern recognition.
And can you give an approximation of how many years of experience you have had with that pattern recognition that you just described?
At least 30.
And how often in the 30 years, by year estimate, have you made that assessment?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe once every year or two.
So would it be correct 30 to 60 times? Let me
No.
rephrase it. How many times would you, based upon what you just said, estimate that you've made that assessment?
At least 15 times.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with the exhibit?
Sure, just show counsel what you're doing.
Counsel has all the
Just tell
exhibits,
what
if I could just tell Mr.
Yes, you
Brennan.
can approach, just show it as you walk up.
Okay, let's just jump ahead a little bit. They may not be. I thought this was at the end of direct, but they're still kind of going.
Sure. Mr. Brennan?
Okay, click to the sidebar. Okay, no, they're still going strong. Okay, hang on just a second.
Okay. So this is one set, the ones around the elbow. Then there
That's
is,
amazing. So okay. So what sounded like the very end of your final conclusions, that was actually before they get into, to answer questions of offenders' questions, how is this 5 hours? We skipped a whole bunch. That seemed like the end. That was before they entered into, they displayed the pictures of the sweatshirt, and they get into actually analyzing the exhibits of the wounds to the sleeve and whatnot. Incredible. So thorough, if not thorough. So let me just see here where we're at here. So sidebar.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize Exhibit 3?
Okay, still
Yes.
on direct.
Will she rely on the information in house notes?
I'll repeat. Did you rely?
Still on direct.
So you ask it a little bit differently. Change the state.
With regard to describe what your DNA,
On direct.
that conclusion,
Okay.
in
Great.
your opinion,
Okay, this must be the final opinion.
determine whether or not those wounds were caused by a dog?
No.
Why?
Because I don't know anything about how the specimen was sampled. First of all, none of the samplings came from the arm of Mr. O'Keefe itself.
What do you mean by sampling?
They sampled the swabs that were performed and sent to the laboratory. None of them came from the arm of the decedent. Secondly, I don't know anything about how the samples were actually obtained from the evidence and what the state of the evidence was, if they actually sampled the correct area. I don't know if there was any continuity of evidence. And then finally, any test can have a false negative result. So the absence of canine DNA does not mean that the canine DNA did not exist. It just means that they didn't capture it.
To your recollection, did the autopsy report of the medical examiner, Dr. Scordi-Bello, reach any conclusions with regard to dog DNA evidence?
The autopsy report, no.
Is there any mention whatsoever in the autopsy report about dog DNA testing for analysis?
No.
Do you have any information that the medical examiner assessed dog DNA at all in the autopsy report?
I didn't see anything like that.
May I approach Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead a little bit while they're approaching. Again, he's very formal, very thorough. He's still going strong.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead a little bit.
To Exhibit 8 that you believe is pertinent.
Because I know that on part 3, by the way, NBC Boston, for whatever reason, did not stream this, which is weird. But part 3 starts like into cross. So they've got to they got to start it on part 2 here very shortly.
Examiner made in the autopsy report.
I don't recall seeing anything in the autopsy report regarding that, but if you can direct me to a certain area.
Oh,
I can look at it.
that's fine.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. If we could go to Exhibit 9 with the court's permission.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, hang on.
Do you recognize Exhibit 9?
Yes.
Okay, I think we jumped across. Let's see, it's just not showing the attorneys. Let's see here. He starts out, nope, I'm still a student.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Do you recognize Exhibit 8 on the TV screen?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
Because I've seen it before.
And have you seen it before in your assessment of the nature and cause of the deceit?
No.
Well, how have you assessed Exhibit 8 before today?
Before today,
Have you assessed Exhibit 8 at all?
I've seen that picture.
Do you have an assessment as to what
Make an assessment.
you observe in Exhibit 8? Do you have an observation about Exhibit 8?
Yes.
What is your observation?
They appear to be blue jeans. They appear to have certain stains labeled with a small ruler. And I don't know the nature of the stains.
Is there anything with regard to Exhibit 8 that you believe is pertinent to assessing whether or not any injury from Mr. O'Keefe was sourced from a dog attack?
I can't tell.
Can we go to Exhibit 9, please? And if we could just, I'm sorry, Ms. Naylor, if we go back to 8. Is there anything in the autopsy report of the medical examiner of the Commonwealth that speaks to Exhibit 8 in terms of the assessment that the medical examiner made in the autopsy report?
I don't recall seeing anything in the autopsy report regarding that, but if you can direct me to a certain area.
Oh,
I can
that's,
look at it.
that's fine.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We could go to Exhibit 9 with the court's permission?
Yes,
Thank you. Do you recognize Exhibit 9?
yes.
How do you recognize it?
Well, I've seen that image many times.
And what is that image?
Well, it appears to be a hoodie, sweatshirt, hoodie style sweatshirt. It's got multiple dark stains on the sweatshirt. There appears to be a large tear through the middle of it, which I believe was probably caused in the emergency room. Because that's
Why do you believe it was probably caused in the emergency room?
because I've made those kinds of cuts in clothing before, having to get access to a patient.
Right. So what is the
So that's
purpose of
commonplace.
making a cut like that on a piece of clothing,
Okay.
given your understanding of the nature of the
It's so crazy that they're still. Let me just go forward a little bit. Their voices do seem similar, I think, too. Great question. Don't know. Oh, see you later, Aaron. Thanks for being here. Oh, now we're getting the spinny wheel. YouTube was cooperating so far today. Doo-doo-doo. Let me see something real quick because I'm pretty sure
changes
Never
to
mind.
clothing.
Yes. So
Describe how.
clothing is important sometimes to determine more information about how a wound was inflicted. So, for instance,
I'm
it's
wondering.
used
Let me
in
go ahead a little bit.
determine if a gunshot wound was an entry or an exit. Now, gunshot wounds, they only do one of those two things through the
Okay.
same hole.
This is almost the end of part 2. Let me pull up part 3 because this should be cross. Let me just see real quick. All right, let me share this to you guys. Wait, that's not the right one. Part 3. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Excellent. Okay. It's working. Okay.
Since the report's in evidence, if you want to suggest a page, you can.
You might be suggesting a negative, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oh, this is still direct. Holy mackerel. Okay, let me go ahead a little bit. Yeah, this is still direct. Holy crap. Yeah, this direct is insanely long. So they're going through all this. All right, hold on. We got to get to the end of it.
This would have been sharper, and the tissue down in here would have been bleeding, or it would have had a crust if the bleeding dried.
Are you able from this Exhibit 30 to give a range of when this wound was first made in terms of days or weeks?
Well, I think I did already. I think that it was at least weeks.
At least weeks? Alrighty, thank you. We can remove that. Thank you very much. Dr. Russell, you have given various assessments and opinions.
Okay, this is the end direct.
Have those assessments and opinions been based upon, among other things, your 30-plus years as an emergency medicine physician?
Okay.
Yes.
And with regard to the same assessments and opinions, have those been based on your 30-plus
Okay,
years
this is her final. God, so this is like the second time we've heard this, but this is her final opinions and conclusions.
as a
Wow.
forensic pathologist?
Yes.
What I want to now move to, and I'm almost at the conclusion of my questioning to this point, do you recall testifying previously in the first trial with regard to rendering an opinion on whether the source of the wounds in Mr. O'Keefe's arm were caused by a dog or a large animal?
Yes.
And do you recall what your answer generally was in respect to a question of were those wounds consistent with a dog or animal bite?
Yes.
And do you recall what your answer was?
Generally, yes.
And generally, what was your answer to the question of whether the wounds were consistent with a dog or large animal?
Your Honor, may there be a reference to prior testimony? I have no idea what specifically we're referring to as far as the applicant.
Transcript, date, where it is.
Happy to give it, Your Honor. May I have a moment?
Yes.
Oh, did I miss some of your text, Fender?
Well, we have a moment. I also add, I don't understand if this is.
Can you put it in the chat again? I don't see it. It must have not come in StreamYard. Can you repost your question?
So for what purpose are you offering this?
Your Honor, I would first like to respond to
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead a little bit. Yeah, Fender, if you, I didn't see the questions. They didn't pop up in the chat. If you could just resend them. Sometimes that happens on StreamYard. Even YouTube is like, this has been going on for such a long time.
I have it here, I think. So so do you need it, Mr. Brennan?
Please.
I'm happy to provide it, Mr. Brennan. It is
Oh.
the.
Okay, are we getting it across? Please. Please, please, please.
We just double check it.
Oh, comments. Okay. Oh, yeah, I didn't see it.
Why don't you come on in and just ask her the question and show Ms. Tina.
That you have given today, consistent or inconsistent with the opinions? Well, let me ask it this way. For the opinions that you have given today, how do they compare to the opinions that you've given previously?
I'm not oblivious to the attempt yet. I object. It's not the proper form of questioning to go back and try to explain potentially inconsistent statements in today's testimony.
Is that what you're attempting to do?
No, Your Honor, it's not what I'm.
All right, so the opinions today, and I guess it's a matter of argument, right? I can be told with the previous, it was attached to the motion that's before me today, the transcript was attached. I can see what her previous opinion is, and then I ultimately decide whether it's consistent or not. Right?
I agree with that, Your Honor.
Okay, so if you've got a site, I'm happy to look at the page to see if I might be able to figure out where you're going, or you can come to sidebar.
Can I come to
explain it,
sidebar
sure.
with it, Your Honor?
I hate that white noise for sidebar. It's awful. Sorry, guys. Oh my God. Awful. Okay.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor, I'm going to see if I have in fact concluded the questions for
Okay,
this moment.
sure.
Thank you.
Jim, can you give me those?
Your Honor, if I may have a point of order question with the court?
I'm sorry?
May I have a point of order question with the
Sure.
court? Thank you. As you know, she has prepared a report, and different jurisdictions do it different in Daubert hearings. Is that something you believe needs to be marked? I was just going to do a brief foundation that she has in fact prepared one. Sometimes courts.
Is there an objection to me receiving a report and evidence?
If the court would find it helpful, I won't object, but I do not believe it's admissible and relevant. If the court would like to reference it, I won't object.
So why don't we mark it for identification, and then the two of you talk about it. We'll see how the hearing goes, and if there is, I may well want to see it, but we'll mark it for identification, Mr. Alessi, and then later see if it comes in, okay? Clearly, I think we're going to have to come back another day, so we'll have some time.
Yes. A for identification. You're welcome.
Thank you. There, Jim, thank you. Jim.
Do you need it? Yeah. Sure.
Yes.
I am handing you, Dr. Russell, what has been marked as Exhibit A for identification, unlike the other exhibits.
Okay, give me just a second, guys. I'm trying to find the rest of this. Okay, I think I've got it. Give me just a second. Okay. This is so weird because the people, this is not how it usually goes with these because they didn't stream, nobody streamed the whole thing in its entirety. And NBC Boston didn't stream it at all. And I'm just trying to pull up the last, but it's very kind of disorganized from the way they usually have this. Let me just see if this is it. I think I've got it here. Give me just a second, guys. This is very odd. I don't know why. Okay, we're gonna have to do it through Long Crime until I can find another feed. Give me just a moment here, because they have the whole thing and they are the only ones apparently, at least in one entire video. Let me find where cross starts. On break. Okay, here's this part. Let's see where we're at.
Opinions. Have those been based on your 30-plus year?
Okay, that's Mr. Alessi. So as y'all can see, they don't get very much time for cross at all.
Yes? This
Yes,
is 1,000 weeks in your estimation.
yes.
You work for some of the most.
Okay, that's cross. Let me back it up a little bit. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. This is cross. Okay. So we'll just go with this. So let me see here. Here we go. Yeah, boy, it's only an hour of cross, but it feels like more in a certain way. Let me get the subtitles. I don't know why I can't find this on any other channel, but that's okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon.
My name's Hank Brennan. We haven't
Right.
had the pleasure of meeting before.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brennan.
I'm going to ask you a few questions if that's okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay.
You shared with
ready.
us that you have an extensive history of experience in the emergency room.
yes,
And in the emergency room, you see all types of injuries, don't you?
yes,
You see physical injuries, yes?
Yes.
Emotional injuries,
yes,
people who overdose, perhaps they're drunk on drugs,
yes,
alcohol.
Okay. Alrighty. Hold on. Let me back this up. This is special.
You see all types of injuries, don't you?
yes,
You see physical injuries, yes?
Yes.
Emotional injuries,
Emotional injuries in the emergency room,
yes,
people who overdose, perhaps they're drunk on drugs,
drunk on drugs.
yes,
alcohol.
yes,
So you cover a wide array of different types of treatments.
yes,
Now, you must have seen a number of broken bones when you were in the emergency room caring for different patients, correct?
thousands.
Arms, legs, toes.
Yes.
In light of your extensive experience in the emergency room, and looking at all of these broken bones, that doesn't make you an expert in orthopedics, does it?
Emergency orthopedics, yes.
Have you ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No, I've
Isn't
never.
orthopedics a specialty in medicine where there is specific training?
Yes,
And people who become orthopedic surgeons, they go through rigorous education specifically to be an orthopedic, right?
well, orthopedics involves more than just setting fractures or diagnosing fractures. Orthopedics involves things like bone tumors, bone cancers, a lot of other parts of orthopedics.
Right. Oh my God. Right. This is so crazy. So let me see. Did I get Fender's? I was trying to find this this feed here. Okay. So Fender says it'll let me click on it. Okay. I get why she's struggling with answering some of these questions the more you do. Right. Absolutely. 100%. The more you do, the harder it gets to answer these questions. Absolutely. Blackwater is home. Awesome. Yes, I know it is. And it's like when you have so much experience too, sometimes it's just remembering which thing you did what thing in or the year. It totally makes sense. But I think that jury will understand that. Yeah, I think it's the beard. You know, the beard. He's had the beard. At first, it seemed like maybe it was for No Shave November or November beard, but you know, this was into December and he still got the beard. But some people grow out their beards for winter. Lally is just a potato at this point, just literally doing nothing. Just sits there like furniture. The drunk on drugs is amazing. So yes, I mean, right off the bat, right? The emotional injuries in the emergency room and then drunk on drugs. You can tell he's had too much coffee for one thing, and he's ready. This, like I was saying, right? How I think we're going to get a little sneak peek as to why the state brought him in. One has to wonder, does the state fear Dr. Russell? Or sorry, let me put this correctly. Does the Commonwealth fear Dr. Russell? And if so, could we be seeing potentially why they chose Hank Brennan? And does it have to do with potentially fearing Dr. Russell? Some food for thought.
Orthopedics, not just trauma. I am an expert in emergency orthopedics, I believe.
So you have decided that you are an expert in orthopedics?
Emergency orthopedics.
Emergency orthopedics, is that a specialty that you get a fellowship in, or somehow you are deemed an expert in any way?
It's not a specialty that has a fellowship that I'm aware of.
So you are proclaiming that you yourself think that you're an emergency room orthopedic?
I have expertise in emergency orthopedics, yes.
Are you an expert in orthopedics?
The whole field of orthopedics, no.
And you don't have any specialized degrees in orthopedics, do you?
No.
You would agree that somebody who's gone through the rigorous requirements of being an orthopedic and qualified, they'd have much more experience in that than you, true?
In general orthopedics, yes. I have a lot of experience in orthopedic trauma related to emergencies.
Have you ever been in any court where you've ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
It was never an issue.
But I'm asking you, have you ever been in any court, state, federal, this country, any other country, where you've been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Has anybody other than yourself ordained you as an expert in orthopedics?
I haven't ordained myself as an expert in orthopedics. I have a lot of knowledge and expertise in emergency orthopedics.
Has any authority ever recognized you and qualified you as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Just kidding.
I haven't declared myself an expert in orthopedics. I have expertise.
You've seen a lot of car accidents you shared with us
Yes.
as a police officer
Yes.
in the emergency room.
Yes.
Perhaps when you were at the ME's office, you saw the consequence of car accidents.
I did. Yes.
Are you an expert in accident reconstruction?
Reconstruction? No.
And when you see
So was anybody else here confused, or if you were watching this coverage at the time with anybody and people were confused, like what is the purpose of this question about are you an expert in orthopedics, right? Was anyone else, because here's the thing for me, when he first asked this question of, or would you consider yourself an expert in orthopedics? And she said emergency orthopedics. Yes. I knew exactly where he was going. But it seems like some people were kind of confused because it's like, that's different. She didn't say that, blah, blah. And I think that kind of, that's not his point, I don't think. So if you guys want to hear my thoughts, I'm be more than happy to share. Yeah, absolutely. That's so true, Candace. Yeah, what, right? I know. And it gets worse. The condescension gets worse. It gets worse. And it's really interesting to see how she holds up. Now, again, this kind of also goes to the other thing I was saying, which is like, are we getting maybe a sneak peek as to why the Commonwealth brought him in? Because of all of the things that the Commonwealth might fear, think about this, of all the things that the Commonwealth might fear that the defense might put forth, especially now that they have more time for her, right? She was so limited the first time and they know what she's capable of. What do you think is the biggest threat in terms of witnesses, right? What is their biggest threat? Now, we don't know yet if the Archdudes are going to be testifying. I would assume so, right? But they are super, super, super specialized in their specific fields. And it seems like maybe the jury was confused when they heard that they were a third party or whatever. Maybe the jury was kind of confused by that. So is it possible that of all the experts that the defense is going to be bringing in, do they fear Dr. Russell the most? Because maybe perhaps a jury, they think the jury's going to really love her the most, right? Is she their biggest threat? And if so, could that give us some insight as to why they brought Brennan in? And is this cross-examination and the cross-examination that will happen in trial, is that their biggest hope to try to get a conviction? Maybe. Yeah, she is their biggest threat. Yep. That's what I think. And it became clear watching this cross-examination. I was like, oh, this is the defense attorney. He's a defense attorney. So first of all, why did they bring in a defense attorney as a special prosecutor? Bing, 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 right? They need someone who can perform a cross-examination like a defense attorney can, right? And they wanted someone who could try, we'll see how it goes, right? But to try to dismantle her credibility, her opinion. And Mr. Brennan is using this as a little practice run, a dress rehearsal, if you will. And again, he's not going to get finished today. This is going to continue on January 7th. And he's trying to see, where is her limits? Where can he rattle her? Where can he get her annoyed, frustrated, all that stuff, right? Because we know these are tactics that you use with experts. When you've got an expert, right, who's so qualified and has so much experience and you can't really poke holes in that, then there's other tactics, right? But one of them is to kind of get them annoyed and to get them agitated. But, you want them to remain professional on the stand, but you do want them to push back when the prosecutor is out of line. So it's a fine line, right? And it kind of depends. Some juries, they might want to see if the jury feels like the expert witness is being bullied, they might want to see that expert witness push back. It really just depends. And it's kind of, there's an art to it. Right? I mean, that's definitely true. And I definitely agree with you on that. If he does this in front of a jury, they'll hate him. That was my 100% takeaway. But here's where I think he's going with this whole thing about, how many cases have you had where you did something related to orthopedics and when you consider yourself an expert? Here's the thing. This is not that question, that line of questioning, which he's going to continue going down and he's not going to give up on it. That line of questioning has nothing to do with actual orthopedics or actual anything. Dog bite. It's a theoretical question. Here's what I think he's hoping to make the point of, and we'll see if he's successful or not. I think the point he's trying to make is he was trying to pick something that she's done a lot of, okay? That is a specialty field enough to where it's a thing you would be an expert witness in, but that she's not called herself an expert witness in. Now, she's been an expert in so many things. So one of the things that was left was orthopedics, okay? Or emergency orthopedics. And he's trying to find something that she would have, A, had a lot of experience in, B, more experience in than dealing with dog bites, C, that she's not testified as an expert in, and D, is something that is a legitimate known field of expertise for expert witnesses, that they can testify to that as an expertise, but that she hasn't. But the key thing is that she's had more experience with that than dog bites. So as soon as I heard him ask that question, I was like, oh, I see where he's going here. His point is to try to get her to say, oh, I've done XYZ, however many, thousands, whatever, like a number greater than dog bites, right? I've dealt with, orthopedic emergency injuries or whatever, right? And then his point would be, so you've never called yourself an expert in that field, but you've done, and then he would do the math. This many more times, you've had this much more times experience with, or you've done this many more injuries in this field, right? Than with dog bites, but yet you still don't hold yourself out as an expert in that field. That's what I think he's getting to. Now, it's a false equivalency because there are way fewer dog bites reporting to emergency rooms than people with broken arms, for example. But that's what I think he's hoping to get to and to try to make that point, because he doesn't have a whole lot to go with her, right? Because she's very qualified.
Different people that come in with overdoses, whether it's alcohol or drugs, you treat them, don't you?
Yes.
But you're not an expert toxicologist, right?
I'm not a toxicologist, no. But toxicology is
dog bites is within the field of odontology, forensic odontology. And again, she has to steer clear of that because they will obliterate her. Okay. Forensic odontology is bite mark analysis, which has gone by the wayside a long time ago. because it used to be something like it came up with Ted Bundy. It used to be something done with human bite marks, and it was found to, and it used to be relied upon. It was found to be completely unreliable. It's a disaster. One strategy he may have at some point, because again, he's not done, may be to try to get her to use those words. He could try to bait her into using those words so then he can obliterate her. Her job, I will tell you, she cannot use those words or she's in trouble. She cannot use those words. So it is bite mark analysis, but it's from a dog. But she cannot use forensic odontology, which is why they're going with pattern recognition analysis. They have to call it something else in order to give it. Remember, it has to be, we went over this at the beginning, it has to be a methodology that is testable. It has to be a proven methodology that is testable. Okay. But they can't call it the methodology of bite mark analysis or they're screwed, if that makes sense. Forensic odontology.
Part of emergency medicine. So we have training in orthopedic, in toxicology, but no, I am not an expert in toxicology.
I'm not suggesting you're unfamiliar with it or you haven't had experience or some training. I'm asking you if you think you're an expert.
In toxicology?
Yes.
No,
And you've shared with us that you agree you don't have any expertise in DNA.
that's correct.
In fact, you know very little about DNA, don't you?
I would say that's pretty reasonable. Yes.
That's what you said.
Yes.
You mentioned that you are generalizing or approximating the number of dog bite cases you've attended to in the emergency room relative to civilian dogs or domestic dogs. Is that right?
Yes.
And you've suggested that you probably treated about one dog
Right.
a week.
And so the thing is, so the reason she said it's never been an issue, in other words, no one's ever asked her. My take on that is no one ever asked her, or she never tried to qualify as an expert in that field. So that's why she can't say. But he doesn't give up on that. He does not give up on that line of questioning.
27 years. Yes? This
Yes.
is 1,000 weeks in your estimation.
Yes.
You worked for some of the most busiest ERs. Was there a lot of patients every day that you treated?
Yes.
On average, how many patients would you treat in the ER over those 27 years on a daily basis?
Daily, I would think about 30.
So if you're treating 30 patients a day over a course of a week, and you consider that in the context of 1,000 weeks, the amount of dog bite cases that you treat in the ER is about half of 1%. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Now you lost me on that.
Okay, sorry. Well, if you had one dog bite case a week, say you had 20 cases a day, 100 a week,
Mhm.
that would be 1% of your cases.
Oh, it could, yes, yes, but it's the number of cases, not the percentage that was asked of me.
Good for her.
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
Good for her.
And so you said how many? 25, 30 a day?
Patients, yes.
So that's less than 1% of the cases that you treated in the ER relative to dog bites.
Okay, that's reasonable, and that's average, actually.
Now,
Right, because again, there's so many fewer. Now, one thing that's funny that they have in common, but they meaning Alessi and Hank Brennan, is both of them do math like on the fly while doing questioning, which is so weird because, as we know, attorneys usually hate math, and both of them they kind of do math while questioning. It's interesting.
when you treated cases of dog bites in the ER, you said that you would sometimes have the reporter, the person injured, or somebody with them tell you it was a dog bite.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes there were communication difficulties, or there was a reason why they couldn't share it with you.
Yes.
And then you suggested that how you came to this pattern recognition skill is that you would have to determine the injury with no help from the reporter.
I was always interested in dog bites, and yes, there were a few occasions when I had to use those skills in order to determine what kind of an animal it
Let's
was.
talk about those few occasions. Why don't you share with us a story where you met the patient, if you can recall, where you had no idea what the injury may have been because there was no ability to communicate, and tell us about how you determined it wasn't dog.
Well, thinking about a specific case, I can think of cases where I determined it wasn't a dog bite, and it was something else based on the pattern of the bite. And am I not answering your question?
I'm not looking for cases where you couldn't determine the dog bite. I want you to share some of this local experience you have in dog bites. And share with us, if you will, one of the cases where there was no information that it was a dog bite, for whatever reason, and then you, based on your pattern recognition skills, determined it was a dog bite. I want you to walk through an actual case that you can recall you had with this scenario you presented.
I mean, again, this would be so. I'm just thinking before she answers that this would be so hard because she's had so many years of experience in so many cases that she starts. If I recall, she starts to describe it, and he's like, "No, I want the exact date and year." And it's like, "Come on, dude, come on."
I can't give you a specific case because, again, in the overall scheme of emergency medicine and the frequency that dog bites are to other cases, it's just not a case that I would remember. That kind of the specifics of the case.
Interesting.
Interesting, he says.
Shared with us the size or the past experiences in presenting yourself as an expert in pattern recognition. And it's interesting that when I'm asking you to support this general.
Objection, Your Honor. Argument.
Yeah, so, oh,
I'm sorry.
counsel,
Yeah.
that's okay. In Massachusetts, typically, we don't give the reason for objections from the floor. Your objection sustained.
So we know that's something that she says. Interestingly, though, I don't know if you guys caught it, but there were times when she was on direct examination, and there were times where Mr. Brennan objected to Mr. Alessi and gave the grounds. And you know what she didn't do is say anything. So I wouldn't be surprised if that gave Mr. Alessi the impression that during the trial you don't give the grounds, but during hearings you do, because the Commonwealth did give grounds. And for example, there were a couple leading, but even that's grounds. Leading is a ground, and there were probably others as well. But I heard at least a few leading objections, and he did not get yelled at or corrected, rather.
No commentary, Mr. Brennan.
You shared with the court that you wrote a few articles that had to do with dog bites.
Co-authored, yes,
Can I ask you some questions about those?
absolutely.
Thank you. Now, the first one I want to talk about is law enforcement canine dog bites. Do you remember that article?
Yes,
And that had to do with what you refer to as law enforcement dogs or canines.
yes,
In that article, you talk specifically about a technique that you believe law enforcement or canine dogs utilize, which is bite and hold.
yes,
And what you have suggested is that the bite and hold technique is different than typically a domestic dog or a civilian dog,
yes,
because it's a trained learning for a dog, correct?
yes,
There are certain injuries you would expect from a canine dog using a bite and hold technique.
yes.
When you wrote this or co-authored this article, you didn't actually sit down with people who had wounds and compare the wounds to the dog that caused them, did you?
To the actual dog?
Accurate.
I didn't, but I didn't.
Just want to know if you did.
No.
Okay. And when you looked at these different cases, there was 700 cases. This was what you called or the authors called a retrospective analysis.
Correct.
That means you were looking back at old files.
Yes, but I participated in some of those files. We were just looking back at the data from those files.
Oh boy.
I participated in the care of some of those patients.
I understand.
Okay.
And so when you went through the files, you didn't have the opportunity then to
He's like, I
follow up
understand, but I
and
don't
speak to
care.
any of the participants or the injured victims, did you?
I spoke to many of the victims while I was treating them.
When you decided to write this article, did you go back and speak to anybody?
No.
There's no mention in this article about pattern recognition in any way. That's not what this article is about. But
No, that's not what the article's about.
it's about something entirely different than what you've suggested today is your pattern recognition skills. Yes?
That's correct. I recognized the patterns because I saw the wounds and I saw the injuries and I saw them over and over and over again. And I recognized those patterns throughout my career. And so it's hard to unrecognize something.
I'm trying to ask you about the significance of your study because
Okay.
this is actually something that you published.
Yes.
And I'm trying to determine, or I want you to be able to discuss the relevancy of this article to what you're testifying today. So the really narrow question I have for you is, in this study, it had nothing to do with trying to engage in pattern recognition.
The purpose of the study was not to teach people pattern recognition. It was to alert them to the dangers of this different type of dog bite so that they weren't under-treating them. But in the process of seeing all those patients, I developed the pattern recognition.
Okay. And so there was another article, Managing Law Enforcement Canine Dog Bites in the Emergency Department.
Yes,
Now, that only comprised of 4 cases, yes?
it was a case description.
Of 4 cases.
Yes,
And do you know, most studies usually include over 30 cases?
it's not a study.
I see. You reviewed types of injuries relative to civilian or domestic dogs or just canine?
Those were canine dogs.
And again, your position is that the injuries by canine dogs, law enforcement dogs, are different in kind than domestic or civilian dogs.
In general, when they bite and hold, those injuries are different. Sometimes they don't get a complete bite.
And so this article didn't deal with civilian or domestic dogs. It dealt with only canine dogs,
That's correct.
exclusively on the idea or the perspective of bite and hold injuries.
It was on the perspective of you need to learn how to treat
Bite and hold injuries.
these dog bite injuries.
Bite and hold.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Now, again, in this article, there was no effort to identify wounds or use pattern analysis. It was the treatment of bite and hold injuries from canines,
That's correct.
law enforcement canines. Yes?
Yes.
And then you also shared with us, in addition to these 2 articles on law enforcement dogs and bite and hold injuries, that you did some revising, editing of a book for a doctor. Is it Vati?
I'm sorry, say again?
You said that you revised or edited a book of a
Dr.
friend.
Vail.
Dr. Vail, I'm sorry, Dr. Vail. And when you were asked about what actually you recall about the topics, you don't really remember the topics of that book. You just remembered you edited it.
No, I remember the topics of the
Okay.
book.
In the topics of the book, it was dealing with human teeth, wasn't it?
Yes, but in the article itself, if you read it, there's mention about dog dentition.
There's a mention of it.
Yes.
Tell us what that mention was.
Well, the mention is that the dog dentition looks different and dog bites look different because of the triangular shape of the dog's mouth versus a rounded shape of the human's mouth.
Well, when they talk about the shape of a dog's mouth, it's not really triangular. It's like an hourglass.
Well, but that was the quote those were the words that were used in the article, and it's relative triangular shape. It's as opposed to a round shape of a human.
Well, in most studies, professional studies by experts, isn't it routinely referred to as an hourglass shape?
I haven't seen that at all.
Yeah, he really gets hung up on this whole hourglass thing.
Well, have you read books on dog bites?
I've read articles on dog bites.
You've read books on dog bites?
She's written the book.
I have read articles on dog
She's
bites.
written.
You
the
ever read
book.
this book? Do you recognize this as an authority?
No.
So for the record, you need to say what you just showed the witness.
Showing Dr. Russell.
Oh, this is really
Dog
funny.
bites.
This is really funny. He whips out this book.
Disciplinary perspective edited by Dean S. Mills.
Is that it? I'm sorry. May I see it?
If the court would let me, of course. May I first?
Yes.
He tried to not show it to her. Wow. This is funny. He's like, get your stupid book out of my face.
Thank you.
This is, y'all, get ready for this. This is one of the highlights.
It doesn't mention if any of these people have degrees of any.
Sorry, Your Honor, I don't believe the question's pending.
Sorry, Mr. Alessi, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, can we hear that again? This is so good. This is so good.
It doesn't mention if any of these people have degrees of
I'm
any.
sorry, Your Honor, I don't believe the question's pending.
Sorry, Mr. Alessi, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you. I don't believe a question
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
pending for the witness.
Okay, are you moving to strike that?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll strike. So, Doctor, I know it's been a long day. Wait for a question, please, okay?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You done reviewing the book?
Yes.
She's like, I'm done. Oh my God. So good. So good. Your book is dumb. Get your book out of my face.
You've, through your testimony, attempted to or suggested there's a distinction between canine law enforcement wounds and that of domestic.
Yes.
But domestic dogs,
You'll notice he doesn't do anything with the book. Like, he did not now questioning her about the book. He put the book away and he moved on. Actually, I think that's the book right there on the table. Did he put the book on the table? Hold on. Did she completely get the best of that interaction? Let's just see if that's the book on the table. Oh my God. Is he like, I give up? She rendered your book useless, sir.
Wait for a question, please, okay?
Okay. All right.
Here's the
Thank
book
you.
right there.
Yes.
See what he does. Oh my God, dude. Y'all look at Miss Little's face. She's trying not to laugh. He chucked the book on their table for some reason. I don't know why. He chucked the book over there. She's trying not to laugh. That is hilarious. He's like, I'm not even going to use the book now. Wow.
you've, through your testimony, attempted to or suggested there's a
No. That was not the defense. That was him moving to strike it because there was no question pending. She answered and there was no question pending. That was him moving to strike it because that's not good for them.
distinction between canine law enforcement wounds and that of domestic.
Great answer for the
Yes.
defense.
But domestic dogs can cut the skin,
Correct.
cause serious injury.
He's moving on. He's trying, dude, this is so silly. Desperation, people. He's going to try to say, is he going to try to suggest that these wounds could be from a domesticated dog, like your pet dog? You know, whenever they say domestic or civilian, they're talking about your pet dog versus your canine, right? Trained law enforcement dog.
Yes,
Deep wounds.
they can.
It's not just that domestic dogs just nip around the corners. They can bite.
They can.
They can attack.
Yes.
They can kill.
Yes.
I know.
You've seen
I
it
was so busy laughing. I'll rewind it and double check. But their voices oftentimes sound kind of similar. I was laughing and maybe I missed it. I thought that was Mr. Brennan.
It doesn't mention if any of these people have degrees of any.
Sorry, Your Honor, I don't believe a question's pending.
Sorry, Mr. Alessi, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, you're right.
I don't believe a question.
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
pending for the witness.
Okay, are you moving to strike that?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll strike that. So, Dr.
Oh, you're right. Okay, I was again. I was like laughing. I didn't hear the Alessi. That is interesting. I don't know why they moved to strike that. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I would have thought. I thought that was Mr. Brennan.
Wait for a question, please. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go back to where we were.
Yes.
They can kill.
Yes.
You've seen it firsthand.
Yes. I didn't witness the attack. No.
Do you doubt that it was a canine attack?
No, I didn't witness the attack myself.
Oh, I understand.
Firsthand is what you said.
That was actually pretty good on his part in terms of like he doesn't have a whole lot to work with. That was actually pretty clever because she's like, I didn't see the attack firsthand. He's like, do you doubt that it was a canine attack? That was a really quick response on his part to try to get her to say that. Of course, she's not going to doubt it, right? But that was the best he could do. I thought that was pretty quick on his part.
Okay.
Thinking.
You made a firsthand observation of a dog bite in the 1970s when you were at a training.
Yes.
And one of the participants was bit.
So now what he's trying to say, so here's the thing. She was probably one of the founding people in studying these types of bites. He's trying to say, oh, 1970s. So like, that's how long ago, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, she had experience back in the dinosaur ages. It's not applicable. You know what I mean? So he's trying to take that wealth of experience and being a pioneer in the field and turning it into like, you know, it's not been done recently type thing.
Yes.
Now, you said you didn't remember the wound.
Yeah,
Do you
I
have any
agree.
memory of looking at what happened after a dog actually bit somebody firsthand?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'm going to allow it's cross-examination on our test based on our testimony.
Say again. Any question?
Should I repeat, Doctor?
Yes, please.
Do you have any memory of what you saw of when a dog actually bit somebody, your firsthand observation?
From 50 years ago? No.
Right. When people came in the emergency room, you didn't actually see the bites or how the mechanics of it happening. You're treating it after they come and ask you for aid.
That's correct.
Did you ever, in any of those emergency room experiences, go and see the dog?
No.
Did you ever have any other information about the dog, photographs, pictures, anything like that?
Well, I did have other information about the dog.
Oh, give me an example. Tell me.
Well, we had to fill out a dog bite report after a dog bite's requirement in Los Angeles County. So although most doctors don't have the time to do it, I tried to comply with that rule. So I would question the victim, try to find out the address of the dog if they knew it. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But I tried to get as much information as I could.
Did you ever get any photographs?
No.
From it? So it was just reporter information from the person who's coming for treatment or somebody that was assisting them.
Yes.
You provided a CV in this case, didn't you?
Yes.
In your CV, you list out some of your pertinent history and experience.
Yes.
Subsequent to your CV, you wrote a report and you signed it on the 9th of December, 2024.
Yes.
And it was provided to the Commonwealth, on December 10th, 2024, 2 days ago.
Yes.
There are a number of things that you offered in that report regarding your suggested experience that are just not in your CV. Isn't that fair to say?
That could be. Yes. Of course. You can't put everything in the CV.
Well, you didn't say anything really about dog bite experience in your CV other than your 2.
What a great answer. You can't put everything in the CV. I mean, she's right. That's true for everybody, but especially her because she's done so much. And that's such a fair answer. And he knows it, dude. How's Frodo? Thank you for asking, Fender. He's doing good. He's almost 14. And he's had like well, they're not really quite sure if it was a stroke or a brain tumor he had recently, but he was struggling a lot and he seems to be doing a little bit better. But regardless of if it was a stroke or if it's a brain tumor, there's really not anything they can do because even if they can do testing to determine what it is, it's not, it's a tumor. Either way, it's not treatable for a dog. So it's just fingers crossed that it was a stroke and that it's not a brain tumor because he's my baby, as you guys know. He's cute though. He's cute. Oh, spinny wheel. Dog. I didn't know they got strokes either, Fender, until I took him to the vet, and that's when I learned that they do get
Articles, did you?
Yep.
No, I didn't.
Okay. And you didn't mention anything about this specialized training or expertise in pattern recognition analysis. You didn't mention anything about that in your CV, did you?
Can't mention everything.
I didn't ask if you could mention anything. I'm asking if you mentioned that.
Well, it says brief CV
though.
on the top.
I'll ask you again.
Okay.
Did you mention anything in your CV about pattern recognition analysis in your described expertise in that?
No.
In your report, and let me ask you before we get to your report, you testified at a voir dire in this case
Yes.
about a year ago,
Less than that.
and you then testified at trial.
Yes.
When you testified in the voir dire and trial, and in your CV, you don't mention the scores of peer review articles on dog bites that you studied, do you?
Ask that question.
I'm sorry. When you testified 2 times before,
Yes.
did you talk about the scores, as you describe it, of peer review articles that you've studied on dog bites?
On the numbers of period. No, I didn't mention that. That's correct.
Okay, and that's not mentioned in your CV either,
You don't usually mention it in your CV about the articles you read.
but I'm asking if you did.
Oh, no, I wouldn't mention that in my
Okay,
CV.
so let's talk about it now since you didn't mention it. You read scores of peer reviewed articles on dog bites.
Throughout my career, yes.
Let's talk about the peer reviewed articles that you've studied on pattern recognition analysis of dog bites. Could you please give me a list of those peer reviewed articles that you studied?
I don't think there are any.
Well, you
There
said-
are some mentions of pattern recognition in some articles. However, I don't think there's a dedicated article on pattern recognition of
Well,
dog bites.
you said in your report that you reviewed scores of peer-reviewed articles on dog bites.
Dog bites, yes.
Okay, so those didn't really include pattern recognition as you've described your expertise today.
Some of them did, some of them didn't, but that might have not have been the major focus of the article.
Which ones did? Can you reference us the ones that you've read and relied upon, in your opinion today, that have to do with pattern recognition analysis?
May I look at my report or my CV?
Sure,
course.
sure. Go ahead and take your time, Dr.
Thank you. Okay, there is, and they might not have used the term pattern recognition, but that's what they're talking about in these articles.
Okay,
There is a article by D. Munich it's actually listed in my report under literature.
okay, I see it.
It's the third one. Yes,
And that deals with pattern recognition
it's
analysis?
part of the article. There was a lot more in the article than just pattern recognition. And again, they might not have used that specific term pattern, but it's what the subject was discussed in the middle of the article. Yes.
What was discussed in this article that you relied upon?
Oh, I relied on the descriptions of wounds. I relied on a lot of this article.
Well, share with us in detail. Could you tell us what you relied on in that article as part of your opinion?
There was a description. There was an area that described wounds and fatal wounds in dog bites, and how to approach them. You know, how to investigate them. There was an area that described what some of these wounds looked like. And there was actually an area that I believe it was this article that said that if you have this plus this plus this, that it is pathognomonic for a dog bite. Now, I believe that was the article that said that. One of these articles did, but anyways, so yeah. So I think maybe you might want to look at them.
Oh, I did.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking you.
Okay.
That's why I'm confused about which one you're talking about.
There was not a recipe book that said, okay, you know, this is the pattern of a dog bite. It might not get a lot of readers for that, but this was a forensic approach as to how to identify fatal dog attacks.
So from your resume, Doctor, could you tell me which article you're talking about?
I'm talking about the third one down.
What's the title?
The title of the article is Forensic Approach of Fatal Dog Attacks, a Case Report and Literature Review.
Okay.
Fatal dog attacks oftentimes involve vulnerable areas like the neck,
Absolutely.
abdomen.
Neck, face, head, yes.
That's
Sometimes the abdomen, yes.
okay. No cases cited in there that deal with wounds on an arm.
Because it's a fatal,
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there weren't wounds on the arm. It's that the fatal wounds, like in the case I autopsied, the fatal wounds generally were in the areas that had organs that could be damaged, like or major vessels like a carotid artery, neck. But there could be a lot of other wounds. For instance, my case, there was probably about 60 wounds.
I understand.
Okay, but some, you're not going to talk about every single one of them because they're not worthy of describing.
Okay. You said that you attended multiple seminars, talks, and lectures regarding wound identification.
Yes,
Okay. When did you attend seminars on wound identification?
intermittently throughout my career. I can't give you any dates.
Okay. Were any of those wound identifications dog bite wound identification seminars?
No, they were general wound identifications, and they may mention bites.
Was there any of these seminars that focused on dog bite wounds?
That focused on dog bite wounds?
Yeah.
No.
How about the talks you went to? Any of the talks focus on dog bite wounds?
There were several talks that focused on bite wounds.
I'm going to ask again. Were there any talks that focused on dog bite wounds?
No.
Lectures. You've cited that you've attended lectures as part of this experience. Can you recall specific lectures that focused on dog bite wounds?
Not entire lectures. There were lectures in emergency department, training sessions, but dog bites were usually mixed in with other kind of animal bites, and discussion would occur because it's not you have to use up an hour usually when you go to one of these lectures, and there were other animals to talk about besides dogs.
In these lectures that you went to that didn't focus primarily on dog bite wounds, did they talk about pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds?
Generally not the emergency medicine ones, because that's actually not really a major focus. The focus in emergency medicine is treatment. I'm a bit unusual because I have this interest that I've had for many years.
So it's fair to say none of the multiple seminars, talks, lectures that you attended had any focus on pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds?
None of them had any focus. That's correct.
Okay. You've shared with us your experience. You've agreed that you are not an accident reconstruction expert, correct?
Correct.
Are you an expert on self-defense?
No.
So when you give opinions about self-defense, I know you have experience and you have observations of what you believe a defense holds, but do you have any actual experience as a self-defense expert?
No.
Do you have any specialized training, certificates, degrees in self-defense?
No. No.
When you went to these lectures, talks, seminars, group meetings, do you have any memory of particular trainings that you had on self-defense wounds?
You mean defense wounds?
Sure, defense wounds.
Yes, I do. I have particular memories of those types of lectures.
Okay.
In topic. Oh, yes, I do.
Well, let's talk about a few of them. What was one of the lectures that you went to that was directed at defense wounds?
Well, not only did I go to some of these lectures, but I gave some of these lectures.
Okay.
And they were child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence lectures. And in the coroner's office, again, mechanism of injury is stressed, and there's a whole training program.
You have no degree in biomechanics?
No.
Okay. And so when I asked you about one of the trainings on defense wounds, I want you to just give us a little detail from your memory about the training. Share with us how you've come to this knowledge on defense wounds.
Again, okay. So in the clinical setting, I was taught many times, and then I subsequently taught students about how victims of a violent act will instinctively bring up their arms to protect themselves from whatever is being inflicted, whether it be knife wounds or
Right.
blunt wounds from an object.
Crucial.
Whatever is
I will give
being
him an
inflicted
extra
on them, they will tend, without thinking, to try to protect themselves.
Mhm.
And I also think it's common sense, by the way.
So on the outside of the arm, if there's marks, that could be a defensive wound?
Yes.
Could it be a different type of wound, not a defensive wound, but a wound where somebody punches or hits and it hits a metal or a stationary or a fixed object?
Could those kind of wounds
Sure.
be up there? Oh, yes.
Okay. So just because there is a wound on the posterior side of the
Ooh.
forearm, that does not make it a defensive wound, does it?
Not absolutely.
Oh.
In context, though.
Right. In so you need to know more
here's the
information.
thing. To Mr. Brennan, I just have to say, your mom's a defensive wound. That's where I'm at right now with him.
Correct.
So perhaps if you saw how that happened, that would provide you more information.
That would be one way.
But if you saw nothing and have really no idea how it happened, it doesn't give you a lot of context of the wound other than it's a wound on the posterior side of an arm.
Well, it does in the sense that it's a common way that people protect themselves.
Mhm. Can someone incur wounds to the forearm, posterior side of the forearm, if they fall to the ground and fall backwards?
They could, but it wouldn't look like that.
Well-
That serious.
Have you studied a collection of wounds when people fell backwards onto the ground?
I've seen hundreds of people that have fallen backwards
Mhm.
or frontwards and every which way.
Wouldn't you want to have an idea what they fell on or into before you make a conclusion that it would not have looked like the picture that we looked at, Exhibit 5?
I've seen, as I said, hundreds, and there has never been a pattern like that ever that I've seen.
Well, when someone hits a moving or a floating object, patterns are dynamic. They change all the time, don't they?
They do during the hitting process. Yes, during that process.
Guys, is anyone having flashbacks to Trooper Paul and his pirouettes? Is anyone having flashbacks to that? Because I am.
You talked about your specialized training. You said you had a program in motor vehicle accidents.
Yes.
And I think when you testified before, Attorney Lally had asked you whether or not your training was, I think you used the word
Don't
rudimentary, and
mention
you agreed.
Lally, no.
Yes, I believe it was only a 1-week course or something thereabouts.
When you're identifying a wound at the hospital, is it important to know, you said it's important to know the animal because that dictates the treatment.
It may dictate the treatment.
What if you can't identify the animal?
Then then you have to go on clinical judgment, and sometimes we even have to call up the Board of Health. But you go on clinical judgment to determine, well, what was the work?
I see what he's getting at. What if it was a shark bite? Because honestly, that would be more likely. A land shark in Canton, Massachusetts, to me, is more likely than Trooper Paul's offering of an explanation of what happened here. Shark bite.
Possibility. That's the way I
would do a
approach
shark
it.
bite?
What is the worst? Could it have been a rabid animal, an animal with rabies?
No, he's not.
Or was it an animal that doesn't carry rabies? And then based
Oh,
on treatment on that.
wait. A rabid shark? A rabid shark? I can see where this could be a thing here potentially.
Sometimes you have to
What
treat
if
broadly, and sometimes you have to, treat people for conditions, even if you don't know 100% that they
Take
exist.
it a step further for anyone who watched my coverage of the Ezra McCandless trial. If you didn't, I think you might still find this funny, but we could take this a little bit further as far as the rabid. What if any rabid land sharks bit John O'Keefe? And this was from my coverage of the Ezra McCandless trial. Hold on, let me pull the comment down so you guys can see the full effect. This is the hipster shark. Shark, sorry, let me be accurate. Sharkweasel. It's a hipster sharkweasel. Okay. Yes.
Are there times when you saw injuries that you just didn't know how they happened?
Yes.
Many times. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And many times you thought what you saw were bites, but you didn't.
Weasels, I'm pretty sure, can get rabies, so that works. That works.
Articulate the animal, right?
That happens sometimes.
Okay. Suffice to say, you have never
I'm getting into
ever
that part of this.
been qualified
It's the voice
in a
of-
federal court
when I come
to
out.
testify as a dog bite expert, have you?
No.
And other than this trial a year ago, have you ever been qualified to testify in any state court in the entire country as a dog bite expert?
No, the issue never came up.
That's not what I asked.
Okay. No.
Again,
You wrote a report in this case?
Yes.
Did anybody help you write this report?
I wrote the report. I had some help with some minor edits and rearranging, some paragraphs or whatever, but putting things in the right category.
Okay.
But no, I wrote the report.
Who helped you with your report?
Mr. Alessi.
So did you write a preliminary or draft report, send it for input, and then change it?
No, I didn't change it. I wrote the report, and I would have things in the wrong categories. For instance, like training experience or whatever.
Who said they were the wrong category?
Well, I think that was my conclusion, actually.
I see. And so how would you go through this editing process? How did that work on this report? Would you send it back and forth?
It got sent back and forth a couple times.
Okay. Now, this report you signed, right?
Did I sign it? Yes.
Nobody else signed it. You.
I wrote it.
Okay. And the reason why I asked if you had help, a lot of your statements and conclusions in this report are different than the testimony that you gave at both the voir dire hearing a year ago and at the trial. Is that fair to say?
I don't think it's fair to say.
Okay.
I think that
Tell me.
I don't think it's fair.
Okay.
I was convinced, if we would get into specifics, I was convinced of that of my opinion back in the voir dire and in the trial. But I think I stated it wrong. I stated it as if I was talking to other doctors. They say in medicine that nothing is 100% in medicine. That's what we learn, when we go up through medical school and residency and whatever. And in my teachings, I always told people nothing is 100%. And that was the number that I was, that I thought I was being asked for. Basically, it was 100%. So that's why I stated my opinion the way I did. But anyways, as I went through material again, I still I was convinced back then, and I am still convinced right now, that these are caused by dog bites. And not only that, but dog attack.
If you were testifying honestly,
here's the thing.
and you're using doctor speak,
So here's the thing. So if you guys remember during the first trial, there was a thing where like she couldn't say 100% about something. And honestly, she testified a lot stronger in the voir dire than she did in the actual trial, both on direct and cross, if I recall. So what this is getting to is that her opinion didn't come across as strong during the trial as maybe it did like in voir dire. And what I'm wondering now, like how I was thinking, like, I wonder if the reason why the Commonwealth brought Dr. Brennan in, right, like we were saying, is because they needed someone who could be really strong cross for this expert because they fear this expert the most. Now, remember the order of events, right? Mr. Brennan was brought on before Mr. Alessi. And in fact, they had one hearing with Mr. Brennan before they made a motion to add Mr. Alessi pro hoc vice. So I'm wondering if it's like they felt like Mr. Alessi would be a real, like, I wonder if it's just, does this all have to do with Dr. Russell? I'm wondering, right? Because again, I thought it was funny that Dr. Jackson questioned her before, and now it's Mr. Alessi. So is there something here, a strategy-wise, about Mr. Alessi's ability to maybe appear really level-headed in case, in the event that Mr. Brennan becomes hot-headed, right? To look better in front of a jury. Is it because Mr. Alessi has a lot of experience, as we heard, helping doctors or experts maybe edit their reports, right? In a certain way. I mean, there's some reason why they brought him in and why he's questioning this witness, even though Mr. Jackson already has experience with her. And I just find it really interesting. It makes me wonder if Mr. Alessi and Mr. Brennan have maybe worked together before, and maybe Mr. Alessi has some experience with this usually defense attorney, but now special prosecutor's style, because sometimes we'll see that, right? They'll bring in certain people who've had an experience before a certain judge or with the other attorney on the other side. I find it really interesting. And so what they're getting to is this whole issue from last time again, where he's noticing that her report was edited, but that doesn't, I think that's one of those things where that's not bad. That's not breaking any rules. He's just trying to find ways to rattle her. And now he's getting to the certainty or not certainty of her opinion from before. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah.
why would you need to change it for today, for this report? Why not just continue to offer a natural, honest, thorough opinion that you had before? Why do you have to change it?
I came up with this. I became clearer and clearer every single time that I looked at the pictures, and I just realized that I understated the last time, that I misunderstood the question that was asked of me, regarding my opinion, and so I felt that I had to be clearer.
Did anybody point out to you that it'd be more helpful to the defense case if you had a more assertive opinion?
No, absolutely not.
So when you went through these days and months since the trial, is there any new information that you looked at that made you realize you underscored the confidence in your opinion?
No.
Okay. Because in your earlier testimony, it's quite different.
I know.
Okay. I want to do this gently, but I want to go through some of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, no. Oh,
when you first testified, you had, how should I say this?
Oh,
you
don't say
opinions
it. Don't say
that
it.
were less than certain
Here
about
we go.
the genesis and cause of the wounds, didn't you?
I think it sounded like I was not certain. However, I was certain. I just didn't express it correctly.
Okay. When you first testified in the voir dire about some of these wounds, you were asked what kind of animal you thought caused the wounds, and you said, most likely a dog.
Correct.
You didn't say beyond a reasonable degree of dog bite certainty, did you?
Objection, Your Honor.
That's rude.
The objection is, he said beyond a reasonable doubt, and that was.
No, he didn't say doubt. He said degree of medical certainty.
No, he said dog bite
He
certainty.
said beyond, Your Honor.
Right, beyond a reasonable degree of medical certainty.
No.
So I heard you didn't get to the certainty. You just heard beyond reasonable and
He said dog bite
objected.
certainty.
So based on that, the objection's overruled.
Let me phrase to make it clear. You didn't say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the bites you looked at were a dog.
I did in one of the Okay, maybe in the next one. Okay, but yeah, if I wasn't asked about reasonable degree of medical certainty, I may not have expressed it.
The court herself asked you, do you know what kind of animal? And you said, yes, most likely a dog.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So you didn't express certainty at that point?
Yes, but again, thinking as a doctor and not a lawyer or a judge or someone, I'm thinking as a doctor, I'm thinking that it's never 100%. And so that's what I was going by. If I was going to be teaching medical students what those wounds were, or another group of wounds, I tell people never 100% in medicine. So that's where that came from. And I apologize if I confused the court.
I don't think there's any confusion. You use the word likely. The word possibly is even less certain than likely, isn't it?
I don't know.
Well, when you're a doctor and you look at something, you say, well, the likelihood is this is the cause of this.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That would be a stronger opinion than saying possibly this.
Correct.
Possible is even less certain, isn't it? At trial, when you were asked about the cause of the injuries, I'm going to quote you, and I can show you if you'd like. It's the trial transcript, page 19, line 21. What you said is, I believe that these injuries were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog, because of the patent injuries.
Yes.
Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Very different.
Okay,
That-
I'm going to
I'll
push
just
back
finish if I
here.
could. Very different.
I'm going to
than
push back here because she was not allowed to make that opinion. She wanted to make that opinion, and they were not allowed to get into it. She was not allowed to say that. She was limited. Dude, that's really stupid.
you're opining today at this hearing.
I'm sorry that you think it is, and I can understand how you believe it is, but it's not different to me. I believed it was a dog. I was convinced it was a dog then, but going by the no 100% in medicine, I didn't say that. I am still convinced it's a dog. The one thing that's a little different is that it's an attack. I after counting the series of wounds and whatever, I am convinced not only was it a dog, striking once or twice, but it was actually multiple strikes by that dog.
Okay, now I want to get back to the testimony we were talking about, your testimony at trial, under oath, okay? Your testimony is you believe they were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog. You expressed uncertainty that you didn't even know or have an opinion about what.
Another reason that's important is because her saying it's an attack, but also saying that those were defensive wounds. Here's why that's important, because in case anybody from the Commonwealth tries to suggest that maybe he was already dead or already injured, and that some rogue dog, now they would probably say it's not Chloe, but that some dog, after the fact, after he was laying there, came over and bit him or something. So again, I just wanted to point that out because this already sets her up. She's already set up to dispel that suggestion because of the fact that defensive wounds and attack versus like he's already lying there, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to be too graphic, but it's already coming up.
What type of animal caused these wounds at that time? Is that fair to say?
I was leaving room for if there was for instance, another kind of animal in the vicinity that, but there's no evidence to that. There's no, paw marks or anything in the ground.
What other animal do you think was in the vicinity that would have caused these?
I don't know, but I was just leaving that again. Being a trained physician, there's no absolutes, and so that's what. The way I approached it.
Did you inquire to see more discovery, to see if there was a pack of wild animals in 34 Fairview that would have caused this? Did you reach out to any of the witnesses or the lawyers and ask if there was any reports or information suggesting another animal?
Are you suggesting she should reach out to the witnesses? Because I don't think that's a good idea. What are you going to get from them? Literally. We saw nothing. We saw nothing. We sat by the windows and saw nothing.
Were you curious?
I did not. I just didn't do it.
Okay. You were asked by Mr. Jackson, trial page 23, line 3. He provided the question, does this appear as it's a pattern injury that you see appear consistent with an animal or a large dog? And you said yes. So you included that this, again, could have been a dog or an animal in your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm. I haven't.
So I'm sorry, we can't take it. Mm-hmm. We need a yes or no.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Again, at trial, page 23, line 6. You were asked, does the number of injuries that you see here relegated to just the right arm, is that consistent with an animal or a large dog? And you said, yes, it can be. Okay. Do you want to see your testimony? I don't want to just put words in your mouth.
No, I trust you.
Thank you. So the question that you were asked was positing that it could have been not just a dog, but any animal. and you were agreeable to that at that time.
Like, again, thinking like a medical doctor, not a participant in a legal setting.
Not to belabor, but these are your words, so I want to talk to you about them. You were again asked, page 23, line 18, by Mr. Jackson, based on everything that we've discussed today, doctor, is it your opinion, based on a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that these injuries were from an animal attack, possibly a large dog? And you said yes. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so your opinions today that this was exclusively an animal attack caused by a large dog, that is much different in kind than the uncertainty and possibility that you admitted under oath during trial, in this case, the first time, or actually the second time you testified about it. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
It sounds like it, yes.
Okay, I think this is a good point to stop because we need to get another date. You're not going to finish in 3 minutes, right? No, okay. All right, so District Attorney, was the date you and I looked at? Was it Jim? Okay.
Okay.
The witness can step down. Timmy, she's going to stay in the courtroom.
So the rest of this is just scheduling, guys. They take a long time to figure it out. They do get it figured out. They figure out they're coming back on January 7th, 2025. So that's it for this one. So yes, they went snowblind apparently. I know. So exciting, if not maybe a little offensive cross-examination. What do you guys think? So as far as I know, that is the next hearing in this case. There's a lot going on though. I've got Alex Murdoch's appeal, so I plan on covering that very soon. I'm going to split it up into parts, and my goal is to cover the whole thing. It's like 150 pages or something. I don't think anybody's actually read any of it. They've just been summarizing it. Anyway, I'm going to go through that little by little. But also tonight, for anyone who missed it, we do have the next episode for Kohberger. We're going to go through the DNA and the IgG because there's a lot of remaining questions. And in fact, everybody's kind of unclear whether, when I say everybody, I mean me, I mean people in the chat, but also not just that, but also people on Logi, people commenting on it. There's a lot of confusion. And so what I've done is I've gone back and found all of the documents that are not under seal pertaining to the IgG and the DNA, starting with the probable cause for search warrants all the way on up. And a lot of the bulk of that is going to come from the summer of last year. And I realized as I was doing this, that was before I started covering it. So I was following everything, of course, since day one, but I didn't start covering it until around the time when they were doing the hearings for the change of venue, because there's a really spicy hearing regarding the jury questioning. And it was at that point I was like, I'm going to jump in and cover it. So that was probably around spring of this year. So I realized, again, these filings that deal with the IgG in terms of getting into the details, the things that we're wanting to know that are actually public, that's where that's from. So I've got a whole list of things I want to go through. It'll probably take more than one stream. But the reason this is happening now is because it came up in the motions to suppress and the state's responses or state's objections to the motions to suppress, because the IgG is a big part of it. And so it got us all kind of asking questions. Well, wait, I thought the IgG was from this and I thought it was from that. And did they use it for this and use it for that? And there's a reason why everybody's confused. But we're going to just go back through this and try to see. It might just raise more questions, but at least we will know what everybody has said, whether that be the defense, whether that be the state, whether that be the law enforcement officers, whether that be judge. And that way we can at least have our best shot at trying to piece it together. So that will be tonight. I believe tomorrow I'm going to finish the state's objections to the motions to suppress. I'm trying to recall what else. And then I think I've got the next Casey Anthony scheduled for tomorrow. But anyway, there's a lot going on. I'm covering as much as I possibly can. That's totally fine, Fender. It's all good. It's all good. There's plenty of other stuff that I'm covering, of course, for the Squirrel Crew. So, again, we got more Murdoch, and then we've got Casey Anthony. Although I know you're not privy to that case. Shanna Gardner is a really good one. For anyone who's not aware of the Shanna Gardner case, that is a relatively new one, and we're getting caught up to where they are present day, but we're not far behind. We're in the right year. Essentially, there's only, I think, if you check the playlist, I think there's only maybe 4 episodes of that so far, and we're almost caught up to speed. So for anyone who's like, what else is going on that's really crazy? Shanna Gardner is crazy. Anyone who doesn't know, please check it out. The the fuckery is a different level. The insanity limit does not exist. It is on a completely different level. And I'm not kidding. Like, this is insane. It is really, the pretrial litigation is not just spicy, it's on fire. It is from day one. So I'm covering all of the hearings and filings in chronological order, and we're almost caught up. So for anyone who's like, what else is something that's worth getting into? Get into that. Get into that. For real, it's it's somewhat high profile, I guess. I don't know. Not that that matters, but my point is that, like, you may not have heard about it because it's not quite as famous as some of these other trials. You may not have heard about it, and it is really fascinating. It's really good. A lot of you guys, I know you would really love to be a part of those discussions when we go live regarding that case. And it is has co-defendants, and they're not severed. They're being tried jointly. That in and of itself is already fascinating. So definitely check that out if you're wanting to catch up on something else that is a current case. That's expected to go to trial in October of next year. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets delayed, but that's what it's scheduled at right now. But definitely check the playlist. Again, it's really doable because I think there's only 4 videos or something like that. Only a couple videos so far that we have on the playlist, but we started with day 1 and we're getting all the way caught up to present day. And again, we're almost caught up. Actually, right now where we're at is like August and September of this year. So we're close. We're really close. We're really close to being caught up to the present day. And that's a really good one. So definitely give that a checking out if you are interested. It starts out dealing with the prosecution potentially breaching attorney-client privilege in a big way. And that is nothing compared to what happens after that. So it's crazy. It's really crazy. And yeah, but anyway, that's it for this one. So for any of the cases that I have covered and covering, as you guys know, well, in case you don't, there's playlists for that. So do check those out. And of course, as always, let me know if there's anything you want me to cover, and I will do my best. For anyone who hasn't heard of the Discord, please join the Discord because you can always post comments, links, stuff like that in there. But other than that, that's all for this one. And I thank you guys for being here, for watching, for being squirrels, because we love the squirrel crew here. Squirrel crew for life, yo, as we always say. And hopefully I'll see most, if not all of you guys tonight for Brian Koberger, or maybe tomorrow. Like I said, I've got stuff slated for like every day. So there should be something for everybody. But love y'all, and I'll see you guys on the next one.